Hello guys, welcome to Watch Harry. So in this video, we will see, what if Morticia Addams discovered 67 memory charms on Harry and sued Dumbledore for magical slavery? He was arrested. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The boy with the fractured mind. The English countryside in late July bore little resemblance to the Addams family's usual haunts. Too much sunshine, far too many cheerful cottages with flowering gardens, and a distinct lack of the comforting gloom that typically surrounded their ancestral home. Nevertheless, Morticia Addams stood on the balcony of their rented estate, a gloriously decrepit Victorian manor that had reportedly driven 3 previous owners to madness, and allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. "Isn't it dreadful, Gomez?" she asked, her voice a silken whisper as she gazed out over the mist-shrouded grounds. "So picturesque." Gomez Addams appeared at her side, cigar clenched between his teeth, eyes wild with the perpetual mania that had first captured her heart. He took her pale hand and pressed fevered kisses up her arm. "Positively banal, cara mia. But the dungeons make up for it. Magnificent chains. 13th century, if I'm not mistaken." Morticia's eyes gleamed. The realtor was so apologetic about them. Called them a historical inconvenience. Inconvenience. Ha! Gomez released her hand to gesture expansively. "These Brits have no appreciation for quality torture implements. The rack in the East Wing is museum-worthy." Their conversation was interrupted by a resounding crash from within the house, followed by Wednesday and Pugsley's monotone voices arguing over what sounded like explosives. "The children are adjusting well," Morticia observed. "Though I do worry about their entertainment options. This village seems normal," Gomez supplied with a theatrical shudder. "Precisely." Morticia's slender fingers trailed along the balcony's stone railing, coaxing a withered vine to curl around her wrist. Little Whinging. Even the name lacks imagination. Gomez twirled his mustache thoughtfully. "The business with the ministry should only keep us here through autumn. Just long enough for the children to experience proper English misery before winter." Morticia nodded. The British Ministry of Magic had requested Gomez's expertise on certain financial matters involving ancient family vaults, something about curse-breaking and inheritance law that had piqued his interest. While the Addams family rarely involved themselves in government affairs, the opportunity to explore the depths of Gringotts was too tempting to resist. "Speaking of the children," Morticia said, "they've been unusually quiet for the past 7 minutes." As if summoned by her observation, Wednesday appeared in the doorway, her perpetual deadpan expression firmly in place, black dress immaculate despite whatever mischief had preceded her arrival. "Mother, father," she intoned, "Pugsley and I require supervision for an expedition." Gomez bounced on his heels with sudden enthusiasm. "An expedition? Marvelous. Searching for rare poisons? Local burial grounds? Ancient curses?" "The village," Wednesday replied flatly. "Pugsley wants ice cream." Morticia raised a single elegant eyebrow. "How conventional. I told him we should look for local fauna to dissect instead, but he insists." A flicker of annoyance crossed Wednesday's pale features. "He says we can do both." Morticia glanced at Gomez, who was already checking his pocket watch with the air of a man contemplating how to turn an ordinary outing into an adventure. "Very well," Morticia conceded. "But do remember, children, we are guests in this country. Try not to cause any lasting damage to the infrastructure. Or at least make it look accidental," Gomez added cheerfully. Wednesday nodded solemnly. "We'll be back before the bats emerge." As their daughter disappeared back into the mansion, Morticia turned her gaze toward the distant rooftops of Little Whinging. A curious sensation prickled at the edge of her consciousness, a whisper of magic that seemed somehow wrong, twisted in a way that called to her innate sensitivity toward the darker arts. Something troubles you, my love? Gomez asked, ever attuned to her moods. Morticia's red lips curved into a contemplative frown. There's magic in this area, Gomez. Old magic, and new, and something in between that doesn't quite belong. Ministry business? No. She shook her head, black hair swaying like a funeral shroud. Something more personal. More controlled. Gomez's eyes lit up with interest. A mystery. Splendid. Perhaps our stay in England won't be as dreadfully boring as we feared. Morticia gazed once more at the distant houses. Perhaps not, mon cher. Perhaps not. Harry Potter was having a spectacularly awful summer. The heat was oppressive, his nightmares about Cedric's death were relentless, and the Dursleys had reached new heights of hostility following Dudley's run-in with a garden hose that Harry may or may not have magically animated. He hadn't, of course, but trying to convince Uncle Vernon of that fact was like trying to teach Hedwig advanced calculus. He'd taken to wandering the neighborhood during the long daylight hours, avoiding both his relatives and the house that felt more like a prison with each passing day. The lack of news from his friends or about Voldemort only compounded his frustration. Occasionally, he sensed someone watching him, probably one of Dumbledore's guards, but they never approached, and he was too proud to call out to invisible observers. Today's aimless wandering had brought him to a small park at the edge of the development. The playground equipment was mostly broken, casualties of Dudley's gang, but the swings remained functional enough for Harry to slump into one, scuffing his trainers in the dirt as he contemplated the injustice of his existence. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't immediately notice the two children watching him from beneath the withered oak tree, a girl in a black dress with pale skin and braided hair, and a round-faced boy with a peculiar bulge in his pocket that looked suspiciously like, was that a hand? Your aura indicates significant magical interference, the girl stated without preamble, her voice eerily adult despite her apparent age. Harry nearly fell off the swing. What? The boy grinned, a manic expression that reminded Harry uncomfortably of photos he'd seen of Bellatrix Lestrange in old Daily Prophet clippings. Are you being possessed? My sister and I have extensive experience with exorcisms. What, who are you? Harry stammered, one hand automatically reaching for his wand, though he knew better than to draw it. Wednesday Addams, the girl replied, stepping forward with mechanical precision. This is my brother Pugsley. We're temporarily inhabiting the old Blackwood estate while Father conducts business with your Ministry of Magic. Harry tensed. You're wizards? We're Addamses, Wednesday corrected, as if this explained everything. Our family practices many forms of magic, most of which your ministry classifies as questionable or extinct. Pugsley nodded enthusiastically. Last year I made Uncle Fester's head explode. Only temporarily, though, he added with evident disappointment. Harry stared at them, trying to determine if they were joking. Neither child's expression suggested humor. Look, I don't know what you're playing at, but, you're Harry Potter, Wednesday interrupted, her dark eyes fixing on his scar. The boy who survived death. Mother would find you fascinating. How do you know who I am? Harry demanded, now genuinely alarmed. If these strange children knew his identity, were they connected to Voldemort somehow? Pugsley pulled an American wizarding newspaper from his back pocket. You're in the international section. British Ministry denies return of Dark Wizard, boy who lived labeled attention-seeking liar. He squinted at the text. The photographs of you aren't very good. You look much more haunted in person. Thanks, Harry replied dryly, relaxing slightly. These kids were odd, but they didn't seem immediately threatening. Wednesday took another step closer, her eyes narrowing. Something's wrong with your mind, she announced. The patterns are fractured. Pugsley, do you see it? The boy tilted his head, studying Harry with sudden intensity. Huh. It's all patchy. Like when Grandmama sewed Uncle Fester's memories back in after that lightning strike. Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the summer heat. What are you talking about? Memory charms, Wednesday stated flatly. Many layers. Crude work. That's ridiculous, Harry said automatically, but even as he spoke, a strange pressure seemed to build behind his temples. I haven't been, you wouldn't remember, Pugsley said, his usual manic grin replaced by an uncharacteristically serious expression. That's the point. Wednesday reached into a pocket of her dress and withdrew what appeared to be a small silver pocket watch. Hold still, she commanded, dangling it before Harry's face. I'm not going to let you hypnotize me, Harry protested, leaning back. It's not hypnosis, Wednesday replied with evident disdain. It's a revealer. Great-Aunt Calpurnia invented it to detect poisons in her husband's food. She paused. It works on minds too. Before Harry could formulate another objection, the silver device began to emit a soft, pulsing glow. In the center of the watch face, where numbers should have been, a counter appeared, ticking upward rapidly, 1. 5, 12. 24, Wednesday's eyes widened fractionally, the most emotion Harry had seen from her. Pugsley, go get Mother. But my ice cream, now. Something in her tone brooked no argument. Pugsley glanced once more at the still increasing counter, let out a low whistle, and took off running. What's happening? Harry asked, his voice tight with alarm. What is that thing showing? Wednesday regarded him with something approaching pity, a disturbing expression on her young face. Memory alterations. 62, 63, still counting. Harry felt suddenly lightheaded. That's impossible. No one's been messing with my memories. 67, Wednesday announced as the counter finally stopped. She pocketed the device and regarded Harry with clinical interest. Who hates you enough to do this? Harry opened his mouth to deny the possibility again, but the pressure in his head was intensifying, becoming a stabbing pain behind his eyes. Flashes of something teased at the edges of his consciousness. Fragments of conversations he couldn't quite recall, faces that blurred when he tried to focus on them. This isn't funny, he managed, pressing his palms against his temples. The Addams family has different standards of humor, Wednesday informed him. This wouldn't qualify. Harry might have responded, but at that moment, the pain in his head crescendoed, and the world around him seemed to flicker like a faulty television. For an instant, he saw not the playground and the strange girl in black, but a circular office, a long white beard, and a wand pointing directly between his eyes. For the greater good, my boy, the fragment vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Harry gasping. Interesting, Wednesday observed. They're already starting to destabilize. Harry staggered to his feet, fighting a wave of nausea. I need to go. That would be unwise. The cascade effect has begun. Wednesday's tone remained flat, but her eyes tracked his unsteady movements. Mother will help. I don't need help from your mother, Harry snapped, even as another wave of dizziness nearly took his knees out from under him. I need to. Whatever he needed was lost as another memory fragment burst behind his eyes. Can't tell serious about this, Harry. He wouldn't understand the necessity, must stay with your relatives, where the blood protection, obliviate. Harry was distantly aware of his body crumpling, of the gravel scraping his palms as he caught himself before face-planting completely. The present and past were blurring, reality becoming increasingly unstable as whatever had been holding back these memories began to dissolve. Through the haze of disorientation, he registered the arrival of new presences, the boy, Pugsley, returning at a run, and with him, a woman who seemed to glide rather than walk, her floor-length black dress out of place in the suburban park, her skin paler than should be possible on a July afternoon. My goodness, the woman murmured, her voice a velvet caress that somehow cut through the chaos in Harry's mind. What an extraordinary violation. Harry tried to focus on her face, but his vision kept blurring, memories threatening to drag him under completely. 67 distinct manipulations, Mother, Wednesday reported. The revealer nearly overloaded. The woman, Morticia, Harry's fragmenting mind supplied from Wednesday's earlier reference, knelt beside him, seemingly unconcerned about sullying her immaculate gown. Up close, her beauty was both striking and unsettling, like a perfectly preserved corpse. "Child," she addressed Harry, "your mind has been most cruelly tampered with. I can feel the magical signatures, primarily from one caster, though there are others." Harry wanted to deny it, to insist that no one would dare mess with his memories, but the evidence was literally staring him in the face, fragments of altered or hidden recollections now fighting to resurface. "Dumbledore," he whispered, the name emerging unbidden as another memory slotted partially into place. It was Dumbledore. Morticia's red lips pressed into a thin line. "The Hogwarts Headmaster? Interesting." She turned to her son. "Pugsley, dear, fetch my black bag from the carriage. Wednesday, contact your father. Tell him we've encountered a case of magical slavery." "Slavery?" Harry repeated weakly. Morticia's cold fingers touched his forehead, and surprisingly, the chaos in his mind receded slightly. "To control a person's memories is to control their very self," she explained, her voice simultaneously soothing and chilling. "To do so 67 times, systematically shaping their perceptions, their choices, their understanding of reality, in magical law, this constitutes a form of enslavement most foul." Harry shook his head, immediately regretting the movement as nausea surged again. "No, he wouldn't. Dumbledore's been protecting me." "Has he?" Morticia asked simply, one perfect eyebrow arched. Before Harry could formulate a defense, another memory crashed through. Dumbledore's office, 3rd year, after saving Sirius. "Harry, my boy, it's truly remarkable how you managed to free Sirius tonight. Professor, now that we know he's innocent, can I live with him instead of the Dursleys?" A flash of, what was it? Annoyance? Calculation, crossing the headmaster's face. "I'm afraid that wouldn't be wise. Your mother's protection, but sir, you said it yourself, the protection is weakening. And Sirius is my godfather, my parents wanted, your parents would want you safe above all, Harry." The wand, rising. "It's for the greater good that you remain with your relatives. You'll find your feelings about the Dursleys are perhaps not quite so negative as you currently believe. Obliviate." The memory dissolved, but its implications remained, crystallizing into a terrible certainty. "He made me forget," Harry whispered. "He made me forget that I asked to live with Sirius." Morticia's expression remained composed, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "The first crack in the dam," she observed. "There will be more. Many more, I suspect." As if triggered by her words, Harry felt the pressure building again, memory fragments pushing with increasing force against whatever spells still contained them. "It hurts," he managed through gritted teeth. "Of course it does," Morticia replied matter-of-factly. "Your natural mental defenses are fighting 67 separate magical intrusions. The human mind isn't meant to endure such trauma." Pugsley reappeared, carrying an ornate black doctor's bag that looked centuries old. He handed it reverently to his mother, who extracted a small crystal vial filled with something that resembled liquid shadow. "This will temporarily stabilize the competing magics," she explained, uncorking the vial. "It won't restore what was taken, but it will prevent further damage while the memory charms continue to fail." Harry eyed the potion suspiciously. "How do I know I can trust you?" A smile curved Morticia's blood-red lips. "You don't. But consider your alternatives." Harry glanced around the deserted playground. His options were indeed limited: return to the Dursleys and hope that whatever was happening to his mind would resolve itself, or trust these strange people who, at the very least, had identified the problem. Another memory fragment, Dumbledore, looking grave. "Sometimes Harry says things, sees things that cannot possibly be true. I fear Voldemort's connection affects him more than we knew." The implication hit Harry like a bludger to the chest. All those times he'd been dismissed, disbelieved, had Dumbledore been actively working to discredit him? To make others think he was unstable? He reached for the vial with a shaking hand. "What do I do?" "Drink," Morticia instructed. "All of it." The liquid tasted of night and secrets, bitter yet oddly compelling. As it slid down his throat, Harry felt the chaos in his mind recede, not disappearing but organizing itself, the memory fragments settling into a holding pattern rather than crashing randomly against his consciousness. "Better?" Morticia inquired. Harry nodded cautiously, surprised to find the pain diminishing. "What happens now?" "Now," said a new voice, rich with an accent Harry couldn't quite place, "we declare war on whoever did this to you." A man had appeared beside Morticia, her husband, Harry presumed. He wore a pinstriped suit that belonged to another era, and his eyes gleamed with manic energy as he twirled the end of his mustache. "Gomez Addams," he introduced himself with a theatrical bow. "And you, young man, have been the victim of a magical crime so heinous that even my deranged cousin Vlad would consider it distasteful." "Darling," Morticia murmured, rising gracefully to her feet, "the children found him in the park." The revealer detected 67 separate memory modifications. Gomez's expressive face registered shock, then outrage. 67. Great Caesar's ghost. That's not mere tampering, that's wholesale reconstruction. Harry stood shakily, finding that while his mind still felt fragile, the potion had indeed stabilized whatever was happening. "I need to contact Sirius, my godfather." "All in good time," Morticia assured him. "First, we must get you somewhere safe. The memory charms will continue to degrade, and when they do, you'll need proper care." "I can't just go with you," Harry protested, though with less conviction than he might have expected. "I don't even know you." "We're the Addams family," Pugsley said, as if this explained everything. Wednesday fixed Harry with her unnerving stare. "Would you prefer to return to the relatives who keep you in a cupboard?" Harry flinched. "How do you, the house speaks," Wednesday replied cryptically. "Walls remember." Gomez clapped his hands decisively. "It's settled then. You'll come to the estate. We have an excellent dungeon where you can recover in peace." "Gomez," Morticia chided gently. "The East Wing guest room would be more appropriate." "The dungeon echoes so." Harry looked between these strange people, this family who had identified in minutes what no one else had apparently noticed in years. His instincts, honed by 4 years of Hogwarts dangers, weren't registering any threat from them, despite their macabre demeanor. More importantly, the fragmented memories now hovering at the edges of his consciousness were painting an increasingly disturbing picture of Dumbledore's manipulations. If even half of what he was glimpsing was true. "All right," he decided, surprising himself. "But I need to send a message to my godfather first." Morticia nodded approvingly. "A wise precaution. We have an owl at the estate, though she's rather temperamental." "Magnificent beast." Gomez enthused. "Tried to peck my eyes out just yesterday." "That's how she shows affection, darling," Morticia corrected him. Harry had the distinct feeling he was making either the best or worst decision of his life. But with his mind in tatters and evidence mounting that Dumbledore, his mentor, his protector, the man he'd trusted above all others, had been systematically violating his memories for years, his options seemed limited. "Lead the way," he said, and followed the Addams family out of Little Whinging, blissfully unaware of the Invisible Order member watching in horror, preparing to report back to the very wizard responsible for Harry's condition. Albus Dumbledore was having a productive afternoon. The latest reports from the Order indicated that Harry remained safely ensconced with his relatives. Fudge's campaign to discredit them both was proceeding exactly as predicted, and would be useful in the long run, once Voldemort revealed himself, and Severus had made significant progress infiltrating the reformed Death Eater ranks. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The boy would remain isolated until it was time to bring him to headquarters. His connection with Voldemort would provide the intelligence they needed, and when the time came, well, that particular chess piece would move as required. It was all for the greater good, after all. The headmaster was just considering whether to indulge in a sherbet lemon when his fireplace flared green, and Mundungus Fletcher's head appeared, looking even more disheveled than usual. "Professor Dumbledore." "Emergency," the petty criminal gasped. "The Potter boy, he's gone." Dumbledore set down his quill with deliberate calm. "Gone where, precisely?" "With them." Mundungus sputtered. "The creepy folk who moved into Blackwood Manor." Black-haired witch, looked like death warmed over. "Had some kind of device, started talking about memory charms." Potter collapsed, said your name. A cold feeling spread through Dumbledore's chest, quite at odds with his outwardly serene expression. "Start from the beginning, Mundungus. What exactly happened?" As the thief recounted the scene at the playground, Dumbledore's composure cracked just slightly, the twinkle in his blue eyes dimming to something harder and more calculating. "Memory charms. 67 of them. The Addams family." He knew of the Addamses, of course. An ancient magical lineage that practiced forms of magic most modern wizards considered extinct or forbidden. They operated outside the jurisdiction of any single magical government, their family magic predating the establishment of the International Statute of Secrecy. And now they had Harry. "Mundungus," Dumbledore interrupted, "did you hear where they were taking him?" "Back to their place, I reckon. Blackwood Manor. Talked about having a dungeon." The man shuddered. "Should I alert the others?" "Moody could have a team therein." "No," Dumbledore said sharply. "No, I'll handle this personally. Return to your post and speak of this to no one. Not even other Order members." Looking relieved to be absolved of responsibility, Mundungus nodded and vanished from the flames. Alone in his office, Dumbledore allowed himself a moment of genuine concern. If the memory charms were indeed failing. If Potter was remembering things he wasn't meant to remember, if the Addams family, with their ancient and unregulated magical practices, were involved. No. This was a minor setback. He would simply retrieve the boy, reapply the necessary memory modifications, perhaps add a compulsion to distrust these newcomers, and return him to Privet Drive. The timeline would remain intact. He rose from his desk, straightening his robes with a flick of his wand. As he prepared to apparate to Little Whinging, however, a silvery lynx materialized in his office, Kingsley's Patronus. Emergency session of the Wisengamot convened in 1 hour, the lynx announced in Kingsley's deep voice. Attendance mandatory. Subject, formal charges of magical enslavement filed against Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore in the matter of Harry James Potter. The Patronus dissolved, leaving Dumbledore standing frozen, for once genuinely shocked. They couldn't possibly have filed formal charges already. The legal process took days, weeks, not hours. Unless they had connections in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement that he wasn't aware of. Unless they had evidence so compelling that even his considerable political capital couldn't immediately suppress it. Unless they were several steps ahead of him in a game he hadn't realized was being played. Dumbledore sank slowly back into his chair, mind racing through contingencies. This was no longer about simply retrieving and modifying the boy. This was now a direct threat to everything he had worked for, every careful plan laid since that fateful Halloween night. If Harry remembered too much, too soon, if the wrong memories surfaced before the boy fulfilled his purpose. For the first time in many years, Albus Dumbledore felt the cold fingers of genuine fear. The Blackwood estate made the shrieking shack look like a welcoming cottage. Perched on a hill overlooking Little Whinging, the Victorian manor seemed to exist in its own perpetual twilight, clouds gathering above its spires regardless of the surrounding weather. Gargoyles that appeared suspiciously mobile guarded the entrance, and the front garden consisted entirely of plants that Harry was certain were covered in herbology's restricted section. "Home sweet home," Gomez announced cheerfully as their carriages, actual horse-drawn carriages, pulled by skeletal beasts Harry couldn't identify, crunched up the gravel drive. Temporarily, at least. Harry, still reeling from the ongoing revelations in his fractured mind, merely nodded. Since taking Morticia's potion, the memories weren't crashing into his consciousness with such violence, but they continued to surface steadily, each one more disturbing than the last. Dumbledore removing his memory of finding a book about Horcruxes in the library. Dumbledore altering his recollection of a conversation with Snape, where the potion's master had actually been civil, almost concerned. Dumbledore modifying his memory of McGonagall insisting he shouldn't return to the Dursleys after she'd seen how thin he was first year. "Your aura is fluctuating," Wednesday observed from beside him. "More memories?" Harry nodded grimly. "Every one showing Dumbledore meddling with my life. Making decisions for me, then making me forget I ever had choices." The carriage came to a halt, and Lurch, a butler so cadaverous that Harry had initially mistaken him for an inferius, opened the door with a groaned, "Welcome home." As they entered the mansion, Harry was struck by its bizarre blend of luxury and decay. Priceless antiques shared space with instruments of torture, exquisite artwork depicted scenes of elegant suffering. It was like walking into a museum curated by someone with a very specific and disturbing aesthetic. "You'll want to write to your godfather now, I expect," Morticia said, gliding toward what appeared to be a conservatory filled entirely with plants that were either carnivorous, poisonous, or both. "Our owl perches in here. She finds the screams of the strangling ivy soothing." Harry followed, trying not to stare as a Venus flytrap the size of a small car snapped at him. "Do you have parchment?" "Certainly." Morticia gestured to an antique writing desk positioned beneath the gnarled branches of something that resembled a mandrake crossed with a weeping willow. "Though I should warn you, once we file formal charges, this situation will become very public, very quickly." Harry paused, quill hovering over the parchment. "Charges? Against Dumbledore?" "Of course." Morticia sounded surprised he would question this. 67 unauthorized memory charms constitutes magical enslavement under Section 13 of the International Confederation of Wizards Charter on Magical Human Rights. "But he's Dumbledore." Even as he said it, Harry recognized how weak the protest sounded. "Yes," Morticia agreed. "The chief warlock, supreme mugwump, headmaster of Hogwarts, a man with extraordinary power and influence, who used that power to systematically violate the mind of a child in his care." Her dark eyes fixed on Harry with unexpected intensity. "Tell me, Harry Potter, if this had been done to anyone else, if, for instance, someone had placed 67 memory charms on your friend Hermione Granger, what would you call it?" Harry flinched at the thought. "I'd call it wrong. Evil, even." "And would the perpetrator's titles and reputation change that assessment?" "No," Harry admitted quietly. Morticia nodded, satisfied. "Power doesn't justify abuse, it magnifies its harm. Now, write to your godfather. He should hear this from you before the Daily Prophet gets hold of it." As Harry composed a letter to Sirius explaining the situation as best he understood it himself, he heard Gomez in the next room, speaking through what sounded like a flu call. "Yes, Cousin Ophelia, we'll need the full legal team." "No, international jurisdiction." "Yes, emergency Wisengamot session. The Blackwood estate, as soon as possible." Within the hour, the mansion's previously empty ballroom had transformed into what resembled a war room. Maps of Wizarding London covered the walls, legal tomes teetered in precarious stacks, and a growing number of witches and wizards in varying styles of formal attire arrived via flu, apparition, and in one memorable case, by crashing through a previously intact stained-glass window on a Victorian penny-farthing bicycle. "The Addams Family Legal Consortium," Morticia explained as she guided Harry through the controlled chaos. specialists in magical law from 7 countries. A tall, gaunt witch with hair that literally moved like snakes approached them, pince-nez balanced on her hooked nose. "Is this the victim?" she asked, her accent distinctly French. Before Harry could object to the terminology, Morticia nodded. "Harry, this is Cousin Ophelia, our lead prosecutor for magical human rights violations." Ophelia circled Harry like a vulture considering its next meal. 67 memory charms, you say? On a minor? Performed primarily by his magical guardian? She made a sound that might have been a chuckle on anyone else but from her resembled the rattle of dry bones. Dumbledore has finally overreached. Magnificent. "I need to see the evidence myself," Harry insisted, increasingly uncomfortable with how events were accelerating. "I know the memories are coming back, but they're still fragmented, and, of course," Ophelia agreed, surprising him. "Your testimony will be crucial. We'll need pensive extraction of each recovered memory, certified by a mind healer." She gestured to a severe-looking wizard arranging crystal vials on a velvet cloth. "Cousin Mortimer is licensed in both Britain and internationally. He'll assist with proper extraction and verification." Harry felt a surge of panic. "You want to take my memories? After what Dumbledore did?" Morticia placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Not take, Harry. Copy. The procedure is entirely different from what was done to you. Your memories remain intact, a duplicate is simply preserved as evidence." Before Harry could respond, the fireplace flared green, and a familiar figure stumbled through, looking frantic. "Harry!" Sirius Black exclaimed, eyes wild as they darted around the strange gathering before landing on his godson. "What in Merlin's name is happening?" "Your letter said," he broke off as he registered the assembled Addams clan, many of whom were now studying him with professional interest. "Black," Ophelia acknowledged with a nod. "Your presence is fortuitous. As the boy's godfather and rightful guardian, your testimony regarding Dumbledore's usurpation of your legal authority will strengthen our case considerably." Sirius looked bewildered. "My what?" "Harry, who are these people?" "They're helping me," Harry said simply. "They discovered that Dumbledore has been modifying my memories. Lots of them. Including..." He swallowed hard. "Including when I asked to live with you instead of the Dursleys." Sirius went very still, the color draining from his face. "He what?" "The full extent is still emerging," Morticia explained, gliding forward to introduce herself. "Morticia Addams. My children discovered young Mr. Potter in distress this afternoon. Our family has some expertise in detecting magical manipulation." "Some expertise," Gomez echoed with a bark of laughter from across the room. "Ha! My great-grandmother once detected a memory charm placed on the Minister of Magic by his own hat. Turned out the hat was possessed by the ghost of his predecessor. Fascinating case." Sirius looked between the strange man and his godson, clearly struggling to make sense of the situation. "Harry, are you sure about this? These people, they're not exactly mainstream," says the escaped convict, Wednesday observed dryly from where she'd materialized beside them. A ghost of a smile flickered across Sirius's face despite the gravity of the moment. "Fair point." He turned back to Harry. "But still, accusing Dumbledore of, what was it?" "Magical enslavement," Ophelia supplied. "The legal term when one wizard systematically controls another through memory manipulation. The penalty is significant, which is why we must move quickly," another Addams interrupted, this one carrying what appeared to be a court summons written in blood. "The emergency Wisengamot session begins in 30 minutes. Dumbledore's allies are already attempting to have it dismissed." Sirius placed his hands on Harry's shoulders, searching his face. "Harry, is this really what you want? To publicly accuse Dumbledore? The political fallout will be enormous." Harry hesitated, another memory fragment choosing that moment to surface. "Dumbledore, explaining why Harry must return to the Dursleys despite their neglect, despite the bars on his window, despite everything. "It's necessary, my boy. The blood protection is worth any temporary discomfort." And then, when Harry had continued to protest, "Perhaps you're overreacting a bit. Your relatives are strict, certainly, but surely not as bad as youthful exaggeration might make them seem." Obliviate. The recovered memory crystallized Harry's resolve. "I'm sure," he told Sirius firmly. "I need to know what he's done, what he's been hiding from me. And if it's as bad as the fragments I've already recovered suggest, then yes, I want him to face consequences." Sirius studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then I'm with you." He turned to Ophelia. "What do you need from me?" "A formal statement asserting your legal guardianship and detailing how Dumbledore prevented you from exercising it," she replied promptly. "And your presence at the Wizengamot session would be provocative." A wolfish grin spread across Sirius's face. "I live for provocative." As the legal team prepared for the Wizengamot session, Mortimer approached Harry with a small, ornate pensive. "We'll start with the memories you've already recovered," he explained, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man whose complexion suggested he'd been buried at least once. "The process is simple but requires precision." Under Mortimer's guidance, Harry extracted the memory fragments he'd recovered so far, each showing Dumbledore casting memory charms to make Harry forget conversations, discoveries, or decisions that contradicted the headmaster's plans. With each silvery strand that emerged from his temple, Harry felt both lighter and more enraged. The evidence was mounting, undeniable even to his own skepticism. Dumbledore had been playing him like a chess piece, carefully controlling what he knew, what he remembered, who he trusted. "That's 11 distinct memory manipulations documented," Mortimer announced after they finished the initial extraction. "Each involving direct modification by Albus Dumbledore." Ophelia, who had been observing the process, nodded with satisfaction. "Enough to establish a pattern of behavior. The remainder can be documented as they resurface." "What happens now?" Harry asked, feeling drained from the extraction process. "Now," Gomez declared, brandishing his pocket watch, "we make our grand entrance at the Wizengamot. Nothing like a good courtroom drama, eh? Reminds me of the time Great-Aunt Lucretia sued the Ministry for trying to classify her as a magical creature." "Ha!" The judge sprouted tentacles halfway through her testimony. "Never proven it was related, of course." Morticia glided to her husband's side. "Darling, perhaps we should explain the process to Harry first." Of course." Gomez agreed enthusiastically. "The Wizengamot emergency session is merely preliminary, a formal presentation of charges and evidence. The full trial would come later, assuming they don't dismiss the case immediately." "Which they won't," Ophelia interjected confidently. "The evidence is too compelling, and we've already leaked enough to the press to ensure public interest." Harry frowned. "You leaked information to the press? Without asking me?" "Only the filing of charges," Morticia assured him. "No personal details. But magical enslavement is a serious accusation against a public figure, it creates immediate accountability." Sirius, who had been conferring with another Addams lawyer, rejoined them. "She's right, Harry. If this stayed private, Dumbledore would have time to cover his tracks, apply pressure to the right people. But this way, with public attention focused on the accusations, he'll have to address them directly," Morticia concluded. Harry wasn't entirely comfortable with the strategy, but he understood the reasoning. Dumbledore had too much influence, too many allies willing to look the other way. Public scrutiny was perhaps the only counterbalance. "All right," he conceded. "But I want to be there. If we're doing this, I'm not hiding." Morticia's red lips curved in approval. "Brave boy. But there's a complication, as the victim in an ongoing investigation, your presence could be challenged." "Unless," Ophelia interrupted, her serpentine hair writhing with sudden excitement, we invoke Clause 73 of the Wisingamot Charter of Rights, which allows the aggrieved party to confront their accuser during charge presentation. Gomez clapped his hands delightedly. Brilliant. Obscure legal clauses, the perfect weapon. Sirius looked less convinced. Is that wise? Putting Harry directly in Dumbledore's path when we know what he's capable of? I'll be fine, Harry insisted, though his confidence wavered as another memory fragment surfaced. Dumbledore's face, no longer grandfatherly but cold and calculating as he raised his wand. This is regrettable, but necessary. You weren't meant to discover that particular prophecy record yet. Morticia seemed to sense his disquiet. We will take precautions. An Addams is never unprotected in hostile territory. And the Wisingamot chamber has anti-compulsion wards, Ophelia added. No memory charms can be cast within its walls. The grandfather clock in the corner, which appeared to be made partially of human bones, chimed ominously. Time to depart, Morticia announced. Lurch has prepared the carriages. As they made their way through the mansion, Pugsley fell into step beside Harry, looking entirely too excited for what was essentially a legal proceeding. This is going to be great, the round-faced boy enthused. Last time we went to a wizarding court, 3 judges spontaneously combusted. That was coincidence, dear, Morticia corrected mildly. The judge's combustion was entirely unrelated to your father's closing argument. Mostly unrelated, Gomez amended with a wink. Outside, a procession of black carriages awaited, each drawn by the same skeletal horse-like creatures Harry had noticed earlier. Thestrals, Sirius identified, noticing Harry's gaze. You can see them? Harry nodded, remembering his research after the events of the Triwizard Tournament. Since Cedric died. A shadow crossed Sirius's face. I'm sorry, Harry. I should have been there for you after everything. Dumbledore said it was too dangerous, Harry recalled bitterly. Another decision he made for me, I guess. Well, no more, Sirius declared, clapping him on the shoulder. After today, things change. As they climbed into the lead carriage, Harry couldn't help but wonder exactly how things would change. His world had already been turned upside down in the space of a few hours. What would remain when the dust settled? Morticia, seated across from him, seemed to read his thoughts. Change is rarely comfortable, Harry Potter, but it is often necessary. Especially when the alternative is continued slavery. I wasn't a slave, Harry objected automatically. No? Morticia raised an elegant eyebrow. A wizard who cannot remember his own choices is not free. A child whose mind is repeatedly violated for another's purposes is not autonomous. What would you call it? Harry had no answer as the carriages set off toward London and the Wisingamot, where the first public reckoning awaited. The Ministry of Magic was in a state of barely controlled chaos when they arrived. Reporters from every wizarding publication crowded the atrium, camera flashes exploding like miniature lightning bolts as the procession of black-clad Addamses swept through, flanking Harry and Sirius. Mr. Potter. Is it true Dumbledore obliviated you? Black. Are you behind these accusations? Mrs. Addams. Why is your family involved in this case? The questions came from all directions, but Morticia had prepared Harry for this moment. No comments until after the Wisingamot session, she instructed the reporters, her voice somehow carrying over the cacophony without seeming to raise in volume. All evidence will be presented according to proper legal procedure. Security wizards struggled to maintain order as they escorted the group toward the elevator. Harry noticed with surprise that Minister Fudge himself was waiting near the lifts, his expression an uncomfortable mixture of gloating and apprehension. Potter, he acknowledged stiffly. This is unexpected. Minister, Harry replied with equal coolness. Fudge's eyes darted between Harry and the assembled Addamses. I want to assure you that the Ministry takes these accusations very seriously. Very seriously indeed. If Dumbledore has truly been, well, the implications are criminal? Ophelia suggested silkily. Unconscionable? A complete violation of magical ethics and law? Fudge tugged at his collar. Yes, well, that remains to be seen, doesn't it? The Wizengamot will evaluate the evidence objectively. Of course they will, Gomez agreed cheerfully, clapping Fudge on the back with enough force to make the minister stagger. Nothing like 50 ancient wizards with political agendas to ensure objectivity. Fudge's face reddened, but before he could respond, the elevator arrived, and Morticia smoothly guided their group inside, leaving the minister sputtering in the atrium. Politics, she murmured to Harry as the doors closed. Always so predictable. Fudge hates Dumbledore right now, Harry observed quietly. He's been trying to discredit both of us all summer. Morticia nodded. Which makes this moment particularly fortuitous. Your accusations align with his agenda, giving us leverage we might not otherwise have. You're using his grudge, Harry realized. Of course, Wednesday interjected from his other side. All warfare depends on exploiting the enemy's weaknesses. Sun Tzu said that. Before Uncle Fester accidentally blew him up during a séance. Harry wasn't entirely sure if she was joking. The elevator descended to level 2, where the Wizengamot chambers were located for special sessions. As they stepped out, Harry was surprised to see several familiar faces waiting in the corridor: Remus Lupin, looking haggard but determined, Arthur Weasley, his expression troubled, and, most unexpectedly, Professor McGonagall, whose tight-lipped expression suggested barely controlled fury. Harry, Remus stepped forward first, embracing him briefly. Sirius sent word. Is it true? It's true, Harry confirmed grimly. I'm still recovering memories, but what I've seen already. He shook his head, unable to fully articulate the sense of violation. McGonagall approached next, her Scottish brogue more pronounced than usual, a sure sign of her agitation. Potter, I want you to know that regardless of what happens in there, you have my full support. If Albus has indeed, she broke off, composing herself. Well, let's just say I've had my own concerns over the years. Arthur Weasley looked torn, clearly struggling with conflicting loyalties. Harry, the family's behind you. Molly wanted to come, but with the children, anyway, we're here if you need anything. Harry felt a surge of gratitude toward these adults who, unlike Dumbledore, seemed to respect his autonomy. Thank you. All of you. Morticia, who had been observing these exchanges with interest, stepped forward. Mr. Lupin, Professor McGonagall, Mr. Weasley, your presence may be invaluable. If you've witnessed any instances of unusual behavior from Mr. Potter following meetings with Dumbledore, or if the headmaster ever discussed modifying Harry's perceptions. McGonagall's expression darkened further. There was an incident, 3rd year, after Black's escape. Albus mentioned that Harry had become unreasonably fixated on leaving his relatives. Said the boy needed perspective adjustment. Harry felt a cold shock of recognition. That's one of the memories I've recovered. He obliviated me after I asked to live with Sirius. He said it was a calming charm, McGonagall whispered, looking stricken. A temporary measure until you'd processed the events at the Shrieking Shack. Ophelia was suddenly at McGonagall's elbow, dictating quill poised. Would you be willing to provide this testimony formally, Professor? Before McGonagall could respond, the massive doors to the Wizengamot chamber swung open, and a court official appeared. The Wizengamot is prepared to receive the parties in the matter of Potter versus Dumbledore, he announced pompously. Harry took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. The fragmented memories continued to surface at the edges of his consciousness, each one reinforcing his resolve. Whatever happened in that chamber, there was no going back now. The Wizengamot chamber was arranged as a circular amphitheater, with tiered seats rising around a central floor where witnesses and defendants stood. Already, the seats were filled with witches and wizards in plum-colored robes, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile to calculatingly neutral. And there, in the chief warlock's seat, sat Albus Dumbledore himself. He looked exactly as Harry remembered, long white beard, half-moon spectacles, an aura of benevolent wisdom, except now Harry could see beyond the grandfatherly facade. Now, with fragments of 67 violations floating in his mind, he saw the calculating gaze, the subtle tension in the old wizard's posture. Their eyes met across the chamber, and Harry felt a pressure against his mental shields, not the brutal invasion of Voldemort's presence, but something gentler, more insidious. Testing. Probing. The wards, Morticia murmured beside him. They prevent direct manipulation but not passive legilimency. Focus on a single memory, the strongest one. Harry concentrated on the most recently recovered memory, Dumbledore obliviating him after he discovered a book about Horcruxes in the restricted section. He projected it forcefully, wanting Dumbledore to know that he remembered, that the carefully constructed facade was crumbling. The headmaster's expression didn't change, but Harry saw his hand tighten almost imperceptibly on his wand. Minister Fudge, acting as interim chief warlock given Dumbledore's involvement in the case, called the session to order. Extraordinary Session of the Wizengamot, May the 5th, convened to address accusations of magical enslavement brought against Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore by Harry James Potter, with the House of Addams serving as magical advocates, Fudge announced, barely concealing his satisfaction at Dumbledore's predicament. Let it be noted that as this is a preliminary hearing, no binding judgment will be issued today. This session's purpose is to determine if sufficient evidence exists to proceed to full trial. Ophelia stepped forward, her snake-like hair writhing with apparent excitement at the legal battle ahead. Minister, esteemed members of the Wizengamot, we come before you today with evidence of the most egregious magical violation imaginable, the systematic enslavement of a minor wizard through repeated, unauthorized memory manipulation. Murmurs rippled through the assembled witches and wizards. Our evidence, Ophelia continued, includes Pensy-verified memories showing Albus Dumbledore personally casting no fewer than 67 separate memory charms on Harry Potter over a 4-year period, manipulating his recollections, choices, and fundamental understanding of his own life. The murmurs escalated to outright exclamations of shock and disbelief. Dumbledore rose slowly, his expression serene despite the accusations. If I may, Minister. Fudge nodded reluctantly. These are serious accusations indeed, Dumbledore acknowledged, his voice carrying the same gentle authority that had once comforted Harry but now set his teeth on edge. However, I believe there has been a grave misunderstanding. As Harry's magical guardian and headmaster, I have occasionally found it necessary to shield him from certain traumatic memories or information for which he was not yet prepared, particularly given his connection to Lord Voldemort. Flinches rippled through the chamber at the name. This was done not to control, but to protect, Dumbledore continued. A healer sometimes must cause momentary pain to enable proper healing. Objection, Ophelia countered immediately. The accused is attempting to normalize criminal behavior by reframing it as protection. Memory charms for medical purposes require consent from the patient or their legal guardian, neither of which was obtained. Furthermore, Mr. Dumbledore is not, nor has he ever been, Mr. Potter's legal guardian. This caused another wave of murmurs throughout the chamber. Mr. Potter's legal guardian is Sirius Black, Ophelia continued, gesturing to where Sirius stood beside Harry. Predictably, chaos erupted at the sight of Britain's most notorious escaped prisoner standing calmly in the Wizengamot chamber. Order! Fudge shouted, banging his gavel ineffectually. Order, I say. Gomez leaned toward Harry, looking delighted. Now it's getting interesting. Nothing like a presumed mass murderer to liven up legal proceedings. It took several minutes for order to be restored, during which Dumbledore's expression remained impassive, though Harry thought he detected a flash of calculation behind the half-moon spectacles. When the chamber finally quieted, Ophelia resumed her presentation. As the evidence will show, one of the earliest memory modifications performed on Mr. Potter specifically involved removing his recollection of requesting to live with his godfather, Sirius Black, after learning of Mr. Black's innocence. "Innocence," spluttered an elderly wizard from the front row. "The man is a convicted murderer." "Convicted without trial," Ophelia corrected smoothly. A fact that Mr. Dumbledore, as chief warlock at the time, was uniquely positioned to address but chose not to. One might wonder why the chief warlock would allow an innocent man to be imprisoned, then later manipulate his godson's memory to prevent him from seeking alternative guardianship. The implication hung in the air, that Dumbledore had deliberately kept Sirius imprisoned and Harry ignorant to maintain control over the boy who lived. Dumbledore's response was measured. These accusations string together unrelated events to imply a conspiracy where none exists. Sirius Black's legal status is a separate matter from any protective memory modifications I may have performed as Harry's headmaster and magical guardian. "You are not his magical guardian," Morticia interjected, rising gracefully to her feet. Her pale beauty and gothic appearance created an immediate stir among the Wizengamot members. The position of magical guardian defaults to the godparent when chosen by the magical oath performed by James and Lily Potter. No legal procedure transferred that guardianship to you, headmaster. Dumbledore's composure flickered, just slightly. As the matter was never formally addressed following the Potters' deaths and Mr. Black's incarceration, I acted in loco parentis as Harry's headmaster. In loco parentis grants limited educational authority, Ophelia countered, not the right to systematically obliviate a child 67 times. The number seemed to shock the Wizengamot anew, many members leaning forward with increased interest. "Let us examine the evidence directly," Ophelia suggested, gesturing toward the pensieve that Mortimer had set up in the center of the chamber. 11 memories have already been recovered and certified by a licensed mind healer. They establish a clear pattern of unauthorized memory manipulation. Before Dumbledore could object, Ophelia activated the pensieve, and the first memory projected into the air above it. The chamber watched in stunned silence as a younger Harry discovered a book about Horcruxes in the restricted section, only to be discovered by Dumbledore, who expressed alarm before raising his wand with the words, "This knowledge is too dangerous for you at present, my boy. Obliviate." Memory after memory played out, each showing Dumbledore altering Harry's recollections when he asked uncomfortable questions, made unwelcome decisions, or discovered information that contradicted the headmaster's narrative. Throughout the display, Harry watched Dumbledore's face. The headmaster maintained his serene expression, but his eyes had lost their twinkle, replaced by something harder and more calculating. When the memories concluded, silence hung heavy in the chamber. Finally, Dumbledore spoke. "These memories appear genuine, but context is crucial. Each intervention was undertaken to protect Harry from information that could be used by Voldemort through their mental connection, or to shield him from burdens no child should bear. The law recognizes no exemption for good intentions," Ophelia responded coldly. "Magical enslavement remains magical enslavement, regardless of how one justifies it." Harry, who had remained silent throughout the proceedings, finally stepped forward. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say, but now, facing Dumbledore directly, the carefully prepared statement evaporated. Instead, raw emotion filled his voice. "You made me forget that I asked to leave the Dursleys," he said, eyes locked on Dumbledore. "You knew they locked me up, that they put bars on my window, that they barely fed me, and you sent me back anyway. Then you made me forget that I ever objected." Murmurs of shock rippled through the chamber. "You made me forget finding information about Horcruxes that might have helped me understand what was happening with Voldemort. You made me forget conversations with Professor McGonagall and Snape when they showed concern for me that contradicted your narrative." Harry took another step forward. "Every time I made a choice you didn't approve of, you took that choice away and made me forget I ever had it. That's not protection. That's control." The chamber had gone completely silent, every eye fixed on the confrontation between the boy who lived and the greatest wizard of the age. Dumbledore's expression softened to the grandfatherly concern Harry had once found so reassuring. "My boy, you've been through terrible trauma. These recovered memories are fragmentary, lacking context. In time, you'll understand that everything I've done has been to prepare you for what?" Harry interrupted, another memory fragment sliding into place. "For my inevitable confrontation with Voldemort? That's what you said right before you obliviated me the first time, when I asked why I had to be the one to face him." A current of unease ran through the Wizengamot members. "There are forces at work beyond your understanding," Dumbledore said, his voice taking on an edge of authority. "Prophecies and magical bindings that cannot be ignored. Then you should have explained them to me." Harry's voice rose with the force of his emotion. "Instead of making me forget every time I asked." The magical tension in the room was palpable, crackling between them like lightning before a storm. Fudge, sensing an opportunity to reassert control, banged his gavel. "I believe we've seen sufficient evidence to proceed to a full investigation and trial." "The Wizengamot will, if I may," interrupted a new voice, smooth as silk and cold as ice. Lucius Malfoy rose from his seat among the Wizengamot members, impeccably dressed and radiating aristocratic authority. "Given the seriousness of these accusations and the disturbing evidence presented, I move that Albus Dumbledore be remanded to Ministry custody pending full investigation. Memory manipulation of this magnitude represents an ongoing threat to Mr. Potter and potentially to others." Harry stared in disbelief. Lucius Malfoy, of all people, advocating for his protection? Sirius leaned close to whisper, "Politics make strange bedfellows." Malfoy sees a chance to remove Dumbledore from the board. Fudge seized the suggestion enthusiastically. "An excellent point, Lucius. All in favor of remanding Albus Dumbledore to Ministry custody pending full investigation?" Hands rose throughout the chamber, some eagerly, others reluctantly, but ultimately a clear majority. "The motion carries," Fudge declared with poorly concealed satisfaction. "Albus Dumbledore, you are hereby." What happened next occurred so quickly that Harry could barely follow it. Dumbledore rose to his full height, power suddenly radiating from him in palpable waves. His voice, when he spoke, carried no trace of the genial headmaster. "I have no intention of being imprisoned for protecting the greater good," he announced calmly. "When you are ready to discuss this matter rationally, without the theatrical influence of outside parties," his gaze flicked briefly toward the Addamses, "I will make myself available." Aurors were moving toward him now, wands drawn, but with a motion too fast to track, Dumbledore raised his own wand. A blinding flash filled the chamber, and when Harry's vision cleared, the headmaster was gone. Chaos erupted once more. Aurors shouted orders, Wizengamot members leapt to their feet in alarm, and Fudge banged his gavel uselessly. Amidst the pandemonium, Harry felt a strange mixture of vindication and apprehension. Dumbledore's flight was essentially an admission of guilt, but it also meant the most powerful wizard in Britain was now at large, angry, and potentially desperate. "Well," Gomez observed cheerfully beside him, "that's phase 1 complete. Nothing says guilty quite like fleeing the authorities in a dramatic flash of light." Morticia placed a steadying hand on Harry's shoulder. "This is only the beginning," she cautioned him. "Dumbledore has powerful allies and decades of contingency plans. But he has also lost something crucial today." "What's that?" Harry asked. "The benefit of doubt," Morticia replied. "The carefully cultivated image of infallibility. Once that cracks, everything else becomes questionable." As Auror secured the chamber and ministry officials huddled in urgent consultation, Harry realized the truth of Morticia's words. Something fundamental had shifted today. The wizarding world's unwavering faith in Albus Dumbledore had been shaken, and the repercussions would ripple far beyond this chamber. For the first time since discovering the memory charms, Harry felt a glimmer of something like hope, not that everything would be magically fixed, but that at least now, the truth had a fighting chance. Chapter 2, the house of unusual allies. The Blackwood estate hummed with activity in the aftermath of the Wisengamot hearing. What had begun as a temporary residence for the Addams family's British sojourn had transformed overnight into a fortress, war room, and refugee haven all at once. Harry stood at the same balcony where Morticia and Gomez had first surveyed the property, watching as additional security measures manifested around the grounds. Spectral guardians patrolled the perimeter, their translucent forms gliding between ancient oaks. Vines with suspiciously teeth-like thorns had erupted along the walls overnight. Even the gargoyles seemed more alert, their stone heads tracking movement across the expansive lawns. Fascinating, isn't it? Wednesday appeared silently beside him, her pale face impassive as ever. Mother's botanicals respond to potential threats. The strangulation ivy has doubled in size since Dumbledore's disappearance. Harry nodded absently, his mind still processing the events of the previous day. He'll come for me, won't he? Obviously. Wednesday's blunt response held no attempt at comfort. You've exposed him. Worse, you've survived the exposure. A bitter laugh escaped Harry's lips. Story of my life. Surviving things I shouldn't. Wednesday studied him with clinical interest. That's why your mind is still intact. Most wizards would have been permanently damaged by 67 memory charms. Lucky me, Harry muttered. Luck has nothing to do with it. She tilted her head slightly. You're like a cockroach. Harry turned to her, baffled. Excuse me? It's a compliment, Wednesday clarified. Cockroaches survive nuclear radiation. They adapt. They endure. A ghost of approval flickered across her features. Grandmother has a collection. They outlived 3 of her husbands. Before Harry could decide how to respond to this dubious comparison, Sirius emerged through the French doors, looking more rested than Harry had ever seen him despite the crisis at hand. There you are, his godfather said. Cousin Mortimer wants to check your mental shields before the next memory extraction session. Harry suppressed a grimace. The extraction process, while necessary for both evidence and his own healing, remained uncomfortable, each recovered memory bringing fresh waves of betrayal and anger. The Daily Prophet arrived, Sirius added, handing Harry the newspaper. You're going to want to see this. The headline sprawled across the front page in bold, dramatic type, Dumbledore flees justice, boy WHO lived reveals shocking mental manipulation chief warlock accused of 67 illegal memory charms on Harry Potter ministry offers 10,000 galleon reward for information. Beneath was a photograph from the Wisengamot chamber, Harry standing defiantly before the assembled members, the Addams family arrayed behind him like an honor guard of elegant death. They're calling you the boy who remembered now, Sirius said with a hint of dark humor. Fudge is having a field day. Nothing like a common enemy to make him forget he was calling you an attention-seeking liar last week. Harry scanned the article, which detailed the Wisengamot proceedings with surprising accuracy. Who's Rita Skeeter's replacement? This is almost factual. That would be my doing, came Morticia's silken voice as she joined them on the balcony. Cousin Dementia is the Prophet's new special correspondent. Journalistic integrity runs in her bloodline, quite literally. Her grandfather was cursed to speak only truth after insulting a sphinx. Harry raised an eyebrow. How many cousins do you have exactly? Family is infinite, Morticia replied cryptically. Her gaze shifted to the newspaper. I see they've included the preliminary list of recovered memories. Harry looked back at the paper, finding a sidebar that enumerated the first 11 memory modifications with clinical precision. Removal of Harry Potter's request to live with his godfather, June 1994, alteration of Potter's recollection of conversation with Minerva McGonagall regarding Dursley treatment, September 1991, removal of discovery of Horcrux research materials in restricted section, February 1994, alteration of memory regarding prophecy details, June 1994, removal of overheard conversation between Dumbledore and Snape regarding the boy's inevitable sacrifice, April 1995, the list continued, each entry more damning than the last. Seeing them compiled so neatly made the violation feel simultaneously more real and more incomprehensible. 67 times. For 4 years, his very understanding of himself had been sculpted by another's design. "There's been an unexpected development," Morticia said, smoothly changing the subject as she noted Harry's darkening expression. "Several Order members have requested sanctuary here following public declaration of their support for you." Harry looked up sharply. "Who?" "Remus Lupin arrived an hour ago. Minerva McGonagall is expected by midday. The Weasley twins have apparently staged what they're calling a tactical evacuation from their family home after a disagreement with their mother regarding your accusations." "Mrs. Weasley doesn't believe me?" Harry felt a stab of hurt, though not entirely surprise. Molly's devotion to Dumbledore had always been absolute. Sirius's expression softened. "It's complicated, Harry. The Order has effectively split down the middle. Molly, Diggle, Podmore, they're insisting there must be an explanation, that Dumbledore wouldn't flee unless he was being framed somehow." "And the others?" "Moody's furious, says he should have seen it, that his own paranoia failed him. Tonks and Kingsley are maintaining official neutrality while secretly feeding us Ministry information. Arthur's caught in the middle, trying to keep peace in his own house." Wednesday, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly spoke. "The seeds of doubt have been planted. They'll grow like mother's strangling ivy, slowly at first, then all at once." She fixed her dark eyes on Harry. "That's why Dumbledore ran. It's not you he fears most, it's them. The ones who trusted him completely." The insight, so casually delivered from the morbid girl, struck Harry as profoundly accurate. "Come," Morticia beckoned. "Cousin Ophelia has prepared updates on the legal proceedings, and Gomez is demonstrating experimental wand techniques to your godfather in the East Wing ballroom." As they moved through the mansion's shadowy corridors, Harry noticed subtle changes to the decor. Battle maps of wizarding Britain had appeared on walls beside centuries-old portraits of Addams' ancestors, several of whom called out gruesome strategic suggestions as they passed. The parlor had been transformed into a communication center, with enchanted mirrors linked to Addams' relatives worldwide. Even Lurch seemed more animated, if such a thing were possible for the cadaverous butler. The library, a cavernous space filled with books that occasionally snarled when approached incorrectly, had become the primary war room. Here, Harry found Remus Lupin deep in conversation with Ophelia and an imposing wizard Harry hadn't met, bald, with intricate tattoos covering his scalp and a necklace of what looked disturbingly like shrunken heads. "Harry." Remus embraced him warmly. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," Harry said automatically, then amended, "Actually, that's not true. I'm angry. And confused. And I keep getting these flashes." "More memories," Ophelia nodded knowingly. "The process accelerates once it begins. Like a dam breaking." The tattooed wizard extended a massive hand. "Cardinal Addams. Ministry Cooperation Specialist." At Harry's puzzled look, he clarified, "I specialize in making ministries cooperate." From his tone, Harry suspected this cooperation involved methods the DMLE would not officially sanction. "Cardinal has negotiated full immunity for Sirius," Ophelia explained. "In exchange for his testimony regarding Dumbledore's obstruction of justice in his case, all charges have been provisionally dropped." Harry turned to Sirius in surprise. "You're free?" His godfather's smile was bittersweet. "Provisionally. Until a full trial can clear my name permanently. But yes, I can walk down Diagon Alley without being arrested." He squeezed Harry's shoulder. "Small victories. The larger victory," Ophelia continued, "is that we've successfully filed for transfer of magical guardianship. As of this morning, Sirius Black is recognized as your legal and magical guardian, with all associated rights and protections." The significance of this wasn't lost on Harry. So even if Dumbledore came back, he'd have no authority over me? None whatsoever, Ophelia confirmed with evident satisfaction. Which brings us to our next concern, your continued education. Harry blinked. With everything happening, he hadn't given a thought to returning to Hogwarts. Obviously, attendance at an institution where your abuser served as headmaster is out of the question, Ophelia continued briskly. But Hogwarts is my home, Harry protested automatically. A home where you were systematically violated, Wednesday pointed out from where she'd perched on a desk covered in legal scrolls. That's typically called a crime scene. Remus intervened gently. Harry, no decisions need to be made immediately. With Dumbledore gone, McGonagall will likely assume the position of acting headmistress. The school itself isn't to blame. Besides, Morticia added, gliding to a bookshelf and selecting an ancient tome that emitted a faint moan when opened, there are more pressing matters. Such as the remaining memory charms still unraveling in your mind. Harry's hand instinctively went to his temple, where a persistent pressure had been building all morning. There was another one earlier. About the prophecy. The room fell silent. What prophecy? Sirius asked carefully. The one about me and Voldemort. Dumbledore only ever told me the first part, that I'd be marked as his equal. Harry's expression darkened. But there's more. Something he didn't want me to know yet. Something about, neither can live while the other survives. The silence deepened as the implications settled over the room. That would explain much of Dumbledore's behavior, Ophelia mused. If he believed you were bound by prophecy to a specific fate, it might justify, in his mind, the extraordinary measures taken to control your development. It justifies nothing, Sirius growled, a flash of his old anger breaking through. Of course not, Ophelia agreed smoothly. I merely observe the possible rationale. Understanding one's enemy is critical to defeating them. A commotion from the hallway interrupted further discussion. The doors burst open to reveal Pugsley, his round face alight with excitement. They're here, he announced. And they brought explosives. Before anyone could question this alarming statement, Fred and George Weasley appeared behind him, each carrying a large trunk that emitted occasional sparks and whistling noises. Harry, they exclaimed in unison, dropping their trunks, which landed with an ominous thunk, and rushing forward. Heard you finally figured out old Dumbles was messing with your head, knew something dodgy was happening when you came back from his office last year looking confounded, told Mum there's no way you'd make up something like this, had a right row about it, decided strategic relocation was in order, especially when we met young Pugsley here at the edge of the property, kindred spirit, this one, showed us his collection of modified dung bombs, got us thinking about combining magical and muggle explosive principles. Purely theoretical, of course, gentlemen, Ophelia interrupted, her snake-like hair writhing with evident irritation. While your enthusiasm is appreciated, perhaps we could focus on why you've sought sanctuary here. The twins sobered slightly, exchanging glances before Fred, or possibly George, spoke. The Order's in shambles, he said. Half think Dumbledore's being framed, half think he's lost his marbles. Mum and Dad had the worst fight we've ever seen. Ron's confused, George, or possibly Fred, added. Keep saying there must be an explanation but won't meet anyone's eyes when he says it. Ginny's furious, says she always knew something was off about how Dumbledore handled the chamber business. Hermione? Harry asked, suddenly realizing he hadn't heard from his other best friend. Sent about 12 owls to the ministry demanding copies of magical guardianship laws, Fred grinned. Last we heard, she was compiling a timeline of every meeting you ever had with Dumbledore and cross-referencing it with behavioral changes she observed. Despite everything, Harry felt a rush of affection for his friends. Sounds like Hermione. She's threatened to go to the Muggle press if the wizarding authorities don't take this seriously enough, George added. Scary, that one. Morticia, who had been silently observing this exchange, stepped forward. Your loyalty to Harry is commendable. You're welcome to remain here as long as necessary. Her lips curved in a slight smile. I believe you'll find our facilities quite accommodating for your experimental work. The twins' eyes widened as they properly took in their surroundings for the first time, the ancient tomes, the bubbling cauldrons in the corner that contained substances of questionable legality, the weapons mounted on walls as decorative pieces. Wicked, they breathed in unison. Pugsley tugged at their sleeves. Wait until you see the dungeons. We've got actual Iron Maidens. As the twins followed Pugsley with alarming enthusiasm, Remus turned to Harry. I should warn you, the Prophet's just the beginning. Every wizarding publication worldwide is running the story. You've become the center of an international incident. Wonderful, Harry muttered. Just what I needed. More fame. This is different, Sirius pointed out. You're not being framed as some mythical figure or attention-seeking liar. The evidence speaks for itself. Which reminds me, Mortimer appeared in the doorway, his ghostly complexion even paler than usual. It's time for our next extraction session. We've identified 3 more memories approaching the surface. Harry suppressed a sigh and nodded. The extraction process remained uncomfortable, not physically painful but emotionally taxing. Each recovered memory brought fresh waves of betrayal and anger. I'll come with you, Sirius offered, but Harry shook his head. I'd rather do this part alone, he said quietly. The memories were difficult enough to process without an audience for his reactions. Mortimer led him to a small chamber adjacent to the library, where the specialized pensieve awaited. Unlike the standard models Harry had encountered before, this one was lined with dark metal and inscribed with runes that pulsed with an eerie light. This session may be particularly difficult, Mortimer warned as Harry seated himself in the chair before the pensieve. The memories approaching consciousness appear to be from your earliest encounters with Dumbledore. Foundation-laying manipulations. Harry steeled himself, closing his eyes as Mortimer placed a cool hand on his forehead. The now familiar sensation of something uncoiling in his mind began, a pressure building behind his eyes as suppressed memories fought their way to the surface. The first broke through like a tidal wave, first year. The mirror of Arreste. Harry staring transfixed at his parents. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live, Dumbledore said kindly. But there was more to the conversation, a part Harry had been made to forget. Sir, why does the mirror show my parents? Is it just because I want a family, or is there something special about them I should know? A flash of calculation in those blue eyes. What do you mean, Harry? Well, Voldemort targeted them specifically, didn't he? There must have been a reason. Something that would help me understand why I survived when they didn't. Alarm, quickly masked. You are far too young to concern yourself with such matters. Your parents died heroically, but dwelling on the circumstances will only bring pain. But sir, trust me, Harry. When the time is right, all will be explained. For now, it is best that you focus on being a normal boy. The wand, rising. In fact, I think you'll find your curiosity about your parents' specific deaths is less pressing than it was a moment ago. Obliviate. The memory dissolved, but its implications remained, crystallizing into a terrible certainty. He knew, Harry whispered as Mortimer extracted the silvery strand. He knew I was asking about the prophecy even then. And he made me forget. The first of many such redirections, I suspect, Mortimer replied clinically. Are you prepared for the next? Harry nodded grimly, and once again closed his eyes as the process repeated. This time, the memory that surfaced was from second year, the headmaster's office, after the Chamber of Secrets. After the basilisk. After the diary. Sir, the diary. Riddle said it was a way to preserve his memory, but it seemed more than that. It was like he was, alive in there. Dumbledore's expression sharpened with interest. What exactly did he say, Harry? He said he preserved his 16-year-old self in the diary. But it was draining Ginny to bring him back. Is that normal for a magical artifact? Could there be others? Alarm, clear this time. Others? Why would you ask such a thing? Just, the way he talked about it. Like it was an experiment. A success. Like maybe he'd done it again. Dumbledore stood abruptly. Harry, these are dangerous speculations. Tom Riddle's diary was a unique dark artifact, nothing more. I think perhaps the trauma of your encounter has led you to overthink its significance. But sir, I believe you'll find your concerns about the diary's nature are less troubling now. Best to put the entire incident behind you. Obliviate. As Mortimer extracted this second memory, Harry felt a surge of rage so powerful his magic flared visibly, causing the runes on the pensieve to glow brighter. I figured it out, he said through clenched teeth. Second year. I figured out he might have made multiple Horcruxes, and Dumbledore erased it. Years wasted because he didn't want me to know. Mortimer observed him with clinical interest. Your magical core responds to emotional triggers. Fascinating adaptation. Before Harry could respond, the third memory began its emergence, this one more difficult, more resistant to recovery, suggesting a more powerful charm had been used to suppress it. The hospital wing. End of third year. After saving Sirius, after the Time Turner, after the Dementors. Professor, now that we know Sirius is innocent, can I live with him instead of the Dursleys? Dumbledore's face, grave but thoughtful. I understand your desire, Harry, but there are protections at your aunt's house that are weakening. You said so yourself last year after the incident with Aunt Marge. And Sirius is my godfather, my parents wanted, your parents would want you safe above all, Harry. But Harry persisted. Sir, there's something else. When the Dementors came, I heard my mother, her last moments. She was offered a choice. Voldemort told her to stand aside. He said he was there specifically for me, not them. Shock, genuine shock, on Dumbledore's face. You heard this clearly? You're certain? Yes. Why would he offer to spare her? What aren't you telling me about why he came for my family? Dumbledore's expression closed off. This changes nothing about your circumstances, Harry. The blood protection remains your strongest defense. But it changes everything about my parents' deaths. If Voldemort specifically targeted me, not them, then there must be a reason, enough. For the first time, real anger flashed in those blue eyes. You are not ready for this knowledge. Not yet. The burden would be too great. The wand, rising. A more complex motion than before. You will remember asking to live with Sirius, and my gentle refusal based on blood protections. You will not remember the details of your mother's sacrifice that you heard from the Dementors, nor the questions they raised. Obliviate Maxima. The memory ended with a sensation of violence that left Harry gasping. This hadn't been a simple memory charm, this had been something stronger, more invasive. Obliviate Maxima, Mortimer murmured as he collected the final strand. A restricted variant. Significantly more powerful and damaging. Harry fought to control his breathing, to push back against the tide of rage and betrayal threatening to overwhelm him. He knew, he whispered. He knew Voldemort came specifically for me, not my parents. He knew and he hid it from me. Every time I got close to the truth, he took it away. Mortimer observed him with something approaching compassion. Each of these memories represents a moment of natural insight, your mind making connections that Dumbledore deemed premature. He gestured to the 3 silvery strands now contained in crystal vials. Together, they tell a story of systematic redirection away from certain knowledge. The prophecy, Harry said with growing certainty. The Horcruxes. Whatever connection exists between Voldemort and me. It all leads back to those 3 things. Indeed. Mortimer sealed the vials. And now we must consider what else he might have suppressed. Harry's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? These three memories share a common theme, you approaching dangerous truths through your own observation and reasoning. But they are only 3 of 67 modifications. Mortimer's expression grew grave. What if some of the others aren't merely suppressed insights, but implanted directives? A chill ran down Harry's spine. You think he put thoughts in my head? Not just took them away. It would be consistent with the pattern of control. Removal of inconvenient knowledge, perhaps coupled with insertion of useful behaviors or inclinations. Mortimer's clinical detachment made the suggestion all the more disturbing. We should consider the possibility that some of your fundamental reactions or decisions may have been suggested. Harry felt suddenly lightheaded. The idea that his very thoughts, his choices, might not be entirely his own. A knock at the door interrupted this horrifying line of speculation. Morticia entered, her expression uncharacteristically concerned. You have visitors, she announced. Most unexpected ones. Who? Harry asked, still reeling from the implications of Mortimer's theory. Narcissa and Draco Malfoy. The Malfoys waited in what the Addamses called the green drawing room, though there was nothing remotely green about the space. The walls were covered in faded black damask, the furniture appeared to be upholstered in funeral pall, and the only illumination came from candelabras crafted from what looked disturbingly like human arm bones. Narcissa Malfoy sat ramrod straight on a settee, her aristocratic features fixed in a mask of practiced neutrality. Beside her, Draco looked markedly less composed, his normally sleek hair disheveled, his complexion even paler than usual, his eyes darting nervously around the macabre room. Harry entered with Sirius and Morticia flanking him like guards. The tension in the room immediately thickened. Lady Malfoy, Morticia greeted with formal precision. What an unexpected pleasure. Mrs. Addams, Narcissa returned with equal formality. Thank you for receiving us without appointment. The two women studied each other with the wary respect of predators recognizing a worthy adversary. Potter, Draco managed, his usual sneer noticeably absent. Malfoy, Harry returned cautiously. This is surprising. Narcissa cut directly to the purpose of their visit. We have information regarding Dumbledore's current activities and future intentions that may be of interest to your case. Sirius made a skeptical noise. And why would you share this with us? Your husband was a Death Eater. Your son has tormented Harry for 4 years. The situation has evolved, Narcissa replied coolly. Lucius's position in the Wizengamot requires him to maintain certain appearances, but our family's interests are not necessarily aligned with either Dumbledore's or the Dark Lord's at present. Harry crossed his arms. Meaning? For the first time, Narcissa's composure slipped slightly. Meaning, Mr. Potter, that I have no desire to see my son caught between two megalomaniacs playing chess with children's lives. Draco flinched at his mother's bluntness but said nothing. You believe Dumbledore and Voldemort are comparable? Harry asked, surprised by this characterization. Different methods, similar disregard for collateral damage, Narcissa replied. What Dumbledore did to you, she gestured vaguely at Harry's head, demonstrates the lengths to which he'll go. 67 memory modifications is not protection. It's ownership. Morticia studied the Malfoy matriarch with renewed interest. You speak from experience, Lady Malfoy? A shadow passed over Narcissa's perfect features. Let us say that certain parallels have caused me to re-evaluate assumptions. Sirius, who had been watching his cousin with undisguised suspicion, suddenly narrowed his eyes. Chissa, did he? We're not here to discuss ancient history, cousin, Narcissa cut him off sharply. We're here because Draco has information. All eyes turned to the Malfoy heir, who straightened under the scrutiny. For once, Harry saw no malice in his school rival's face, only a complex mixture of fear and determination. My father's been tracking Dumbledore's movements, Draco began, his voice steadier than his appearance suggested. Not for the Ministry, for himself. For us. He glanced at his mother, who nodded slightly. Last night, Dumbledore was seen entering Gringotts through a private entrance reserved for account holders of particular lineages. He accessed the Potter family vault, Narcissa continued when Draco hesitated. A vault to which he should have had no access once your godfather reclaimed his role as your magical guardian. Harry and Sirius exchanged alarmed looks. What could he want from my family vault? Harry asked. I've only ever been to my personal vault. The Potter family vault contains more than gold, Morticia observed. Ancient families often store heirlooms, documents, and artifacts of significant magical importance. Artifacts that might be linked to your parents' research, Narcissa added. Or to the prophecy concerning you and the Dark Lord. The implications settled heavily over the room. Dumbledore, desperate and on the run, breaking into the Potter vault to retrieve something he didn't want Harry to have. Why are you telling us this? Harry asked directly. What do you gain? Draco and Narcissa exchanged glances before the boy spoke. Because I saw what he did to you in those memories they showed at the Wizengamot. And it was. He seemed to struggle for words. It was wrong. Even for you, Potter. The admission, clearly difficult for his longtime rival, struck Harry as more genuine than anything he'd ever heard from Draco Malfoy. There's more, Narcissa continued. After Gringotts, Dumbledore traveled to the Department of Mysteries. We believe he may have accessed the Hall of Prophecies. Sirius swore under his breath. The full prophecy record. Indeed. Narcissa's expression remained carefully neutral. Which suggests there are elements of the prophecy even he hadn't previously disclosed to his closest allies. Harry's mind raced with implications. He's gathering resources. Preparing for something. The question, Morticia observed, is whether his preparations are defensive or offensive. An uncomfortable silence fell as they considered the possibilities. Dumbledore cornered was Dumbledore dangerous, and the headmaster had decades of secrets to protect. We should leave, Narcissa said finally, rising with graceful precision. Our absence will be noticed if prolonged. I've provided what information I can. Morticia inclined her head. The Addams family acknowledges this debt. The formal phrasing seemed to satisfy Narcissa, who nodded once before turning to her son. Draco. The boy stood, but hesitated, his eyes meeting Harry's with uncharacteristic directness. Potter, there's something else. Something I overheard my father saying to Snape. Narcissa tensed visibly. Draco, we discussed, he needs to know, Mother. Draco's voice held unexpected firmness. Dumbledore isn't just after artifacts. He's looking for you specifically, Potter. He told Snape that without his guidance, you're a danger to yourself and others. That your connection to the Dark Lord makes you unstable. He's setting the groundwork to paint you as mentally compromised, Narcissa translated bluntly. Creating justification for taking you back by force if necessary. Harry felt cold anger settle in his chest. Even now, Dumbledore was trying to control the narrative, to undermine Harry's autonomy. Thank you, he said to Draco, meaning it. For the warning. A flicker of something, not quite a smile, but perhaps the absence of hostility, crossed Draco's face before he followed his mother from the room. After they departed, Sirius turned to Harry, his expression grave. We need to check what's missing from your family vault. And accelerate our legal strategy, Morticia added. If Dumbledore is attempting to reframe the narrative as protective custody of a mentally unstable minor, we must counter decisively. Harry nodded, but his mind had already moved beyond these immediate concerns to a more fundamental question. If Dumbledore had taken steps to gather resources and was framing Harry as unstable, what exactly was he planning? Gringotts Bank maintained its air of imperturbable solidity despite the political upheaval rocking Wizarding Britain. The marble halls echoed with business as usual, if one ignored the increased goblin security and the wanted posters featuring Albus Dumbledore's serene, twinkling face displayed at every teller station. Harry, flanked by Sirius and Gomez, approached the head teller with as much confidence as he could muster. Despite his new legal status as the Potter heir with full access rights, he still felt like an imposter in the realm of ancient family wealth and privilege. "Mr. Potter," the goblin acknowledged without looking up from his ledger. "We've been expecting you." "You have?" Harry asked, surprised. "Indeed. Unauthorized access to a primary family vault triggers automatic notification to the rightful heir." The goblin finally raised his eyes, revealing a predatory gleam. "Gringotts take such violations very seriously." "Very seriously indeed." Sirius stepped forward. "As Mr. Potter's legal guardian, I formally request an inventory comparison showing all items removed from the Potter family vault within the past 24 hours. And as the family's legal representative," Gomez added with unexpected seriousness, "I remind Gringotts of Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the 1732 Covenant regarding mandatory security reparations for breaches of ancestral vaults." The goblin's eyes narrowed at Gomez. "The Addams family remains well-informed on obscure banking covenants, I see." "We invented half of them," Gomez replied cheerfully. "Great-grandfather Eridanus had quite the flair for punitive financial clauses." After a moment of tense silence, the goblin nodded sharply. "Follow me." They were led through a maze of corridors to a private conference room where an ancient goblin waited, surrounded by scrolls and ledgers. "Director Ragnarok," Sirius greeted with a respectful nod. "Black Potter." The director's gravelly voice betrayed no emotion. "Addams." This last was delivered with a hint of wariness. "A pleasure as always, Director," Gomez replied, twirling his mustache. "Still wearing the amulet, I see. Wise choice. The curse only activates if removed." Ragnarok's hand moved unconsciously to the gold medallion at his throat before he caught himself and scowled. "We are here to discuss the Potter Vault breach, not ancient financial disagreements." Of course," Gomez agreed amiably. "Though I'd hardly call 3 centuries of compound interest ancient." Harry, baffled by this exchange, refocused on the matter at hand. "What did Dumbledore take from my family vault?" Ragnarok pushed forward a detailed ledger. 3 items were removed: a sealed correspondence box bearing the Potter family crest, a crystal memory orb of the type used for storing pensive collections, and a rare tome entitled Sacrificial Magics of the Ancient Houses. "Letters, memories, and blood magic research," Sirius summarized grimly. "He's gathering evidence. Or destroying it." "Can you tell whose memories were in the orb?" Harry asked. "My parents?" Ragnarok consulted another document. The orb was registered to Lily Potter née Evans, deposited October 1981. Harry felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. His mother's memories, from just before her death, now in Dumbledore's possession. "What about the letters?" Sirius pressed. "Any record of their contents?" "Gringotts does not inspect the contents of sealed items within vaults," Ragnarok replied stiffly. "We merely track their presence or absence." Gomez, who had been studying the ledger with unexpected focus, suddenly pointed to an entry. "There's a 4th item listed here, Artifact P7J, removed 2 hours after the initial breach." Ragnarok's expression darkened. "A secondary access. Most irregular." "Who?" Harry demanded. "Severus Snape," Ragnarok replied. "Using an authorization key created prior to your parents' deaths." Sirius exploded. Snape had access to James and Lily's vault? That's impossible. Not access to the vault itself, Ragnarok clarified. A specific authorization for a single item, created by Lily Potter in September 1981, to be executed in the event of catastrophic circumstances. Harry's mind reeled with implications. His mother had trusted Snape with something important enough to create a special Gringotts protocol, mere weeks before her death. "What was Artifact P7J?" he asked quietly. "The description is limited." Ragnarok consulted yet another scroll. "A sealed crystal file containing, quote, contingency measures relevant to prophecy fulfillment." The silence that followed was deafening. "My mother knew about the prophecy," Harry said finally. "She was researching it. Preparing for something." Sirius ran a hand through his hair, visibly distressed. "Lily was brilliant with charms and potions research. If she created some kind of contingency spell and entrusted it to Snape, of all people," Harry added, still struggling with this revelation. "Why him? Why not you? Or Dumbledore?" "Perhaps," Gomez suggested thoughtfully, "because she didn't trust either option completely. Sirius was your father's best friend, but Snape had been her friend first." "Some friend," Sirius muttered. "Death Eater scum." "Yet she trusted him with this specific task," Gomez persisted. "Which raises the question, is Snape acting on Dumbledore's behalf now, or on your mother's final instructions?" It was a question Harry couldn't begin to answer. His understanding of Snape, always complicated by mutual animosity, had just become exponentially more complex. "There's one more thing," Ragnarok said, producing a small golden key. "Upon confirmation of your magical guardianship transfer, this became accessible." He slid the key across the table. "It opens a separate vault established by your mother, with instructions that you receive access upon either reaching majority or, and I quote, escape from manipulated circumstances." Harry stared at the key. "My mother, she anticipated this? She knew someone might try to control me?" "Lily was many things," Sirius said softly, "but naive wasn't one of them. If she set up contingencies, it was because she saw possibilities others missed." With trembling fingers, Harry took the key. "I want to see this vault. Now." The ride to the deepest levels of Gringotts was longer and more winding than any Harry had experienced before. When they finally stopped, they faced not an ordinary vault door but a smooth expanse of black stone bearing only a small keyhole. "Evans Contingency Vault," Ragnarok announced. "Established October 27, 1981. 4 days before her death." Harry inserted the key with reverent care. The black stone dissolved like smoke, revealing a small chamber containing not gold or treasures, but a single pedestal. Upon it rested a letter and what appeared to be an ordinary snow globe. The letter, sealed with wax bearing his mother's initials, was addressed simply, "To Harry, when you begin to remember." With shaking hands, he broke the seal and unfolded parchment covered in elegant script. "My darling boy, if you're reading this, 2 things have happened. You've survived what's coming, and you've begun to question Albus Dumbledore's influence over your life. I pray I'm being paranoid, that this letter will remain sealed forever, but recent discoveries have made me fear otherwise. When James and I went into hiding, we did so believing Dumbledore had our best interests at heart. Now I'm no longer certain. The prophecy that drove us into seclusion, the one concerning you and Voldemort, has aspects Dumbledore has concealed even from us, your parents. Through research I should probably not have conducted, I've discovered references to ancient magic involving prophesied children. Some of it disturbs me deeply. Albus speaks of love and sacrifice as our greatest weapons, but his eyes betray calculation when he looks at you, Harry. Not malice, something more complex. The burden of terrible knowledge, perhaps, or the weight of impossible choices. I've created several contingencies in case the worst happens. This vault is one. The memory orb in our family vault is another. The final measure I've entrusted to Severus, yes, Severus Snape. Despite our estrangement and his terrible choices, a magical oath binds him to your protection. He was my first friend in the magical world, and despite everything, there remains a core of goodness in him that even he doesn't recognize. The globe beside this letter contains my research, everything I've learned about the prophecy, about Voldemort's obsession with cheating death, and about Dumbledore's possible motivations. To activate it, simply say, I solemnly swear that I am Harry James Potter, son of Lily and James, seeking the truth. I don't know what circumstances have led you here, my love. I don't know what childhood you've had or what challenges you've faced. But know this with absolute certainty, your father and I loved you beyond measure. Whatever sacrifices we made freely, for you, not for prophecies, not for the greater good, but for our son. Trust your instincts, Harry. You are more than a pawn in old men's games. With all my heart, Mum. Harry didn't realize he was crying until a tear splashed onto the parchment. He hastily wiped his eyes, though both Sirius and Gomez had the decency to look elsewhere, giving him a moment to compose himself. She knew, Harry whispered finally. She suspected Dumbledore had plans for me that went beyond protection. Sirius, whose own eyes were suspiciously bright, nodded. Lily was always the clever one. James and I, we trusted Dumbledore completely. Never questioned. Harry carefully refolded the letter and turned to the snow globe. It appeared ordinary except for a strange silvery quality to the snow inside, which seemed to move with purpose rather than random swirling. Taking a deep breath, he spoke the activation phrase, I solemnly swear that I am Harry James Potter, son of Lily and James, seeking the truth. The globe's glass surface became permeable, the silvery particles rising to engulf his hand as he touched it. They crawled up his arm, painless but strange, before suddenly rushing toward his head. Harry gasped as a flood of knowledge poured directly into his mind, not as disjointed memories but as structured information, organized with academic precision. His mother's research. Her theories. Her discoveries. When the transfer completed, Harry staggered back, overwhelmed by the volume and implications of what he'd received. Harry? Sirius's voice seemed distant. What is it? What did you see? Everything, Harry whispered. She figured it all out. The Horcruxes. The prophecy. Why Voldemort came for me specifically. And? Gomez prompted gently when Harry fell silent. Harry looked up, his eyes haunted. And why Dumbledore has been preparing me to die. The revelation of Lily Potter's research cast a pall over Blackwood Manor that even the Addamses found sobering. Harry, still processing the enormous download of information, had retreated to the east wing balcony where Morticia found him hours later, staring unseeingly at the gathering dusk. Death is rarely the end in my family's experience, she observed, joining him at the railing. We've had relatives return from the grave for unpaid debts, unfinished revenge, and once, a particularly competitive game of canasta. Despite everything, Harry felt his lips twitch. The Addamses' casual approach to mortality was strangely comforting in his current circumstances. My mother believed Dumbledore suspected I'm a Horcrux, he said finally. That when Voldemort tried to kill me, a piece of his soul attached to mine. That's why I can speak Parseltongue. Why I have this connection to his mind. A fascinating theory, Morticia replied, betraying neither shock nor disbelief. And consistent with the evidence. She also believed Dumbledore interpreted the prophecy to mean I have to die before Voldemort can be truly defeated. Harry's voice was hollow. That's why he's been controlling me so carefully. Making sure I develop the right way, with the right values, the right friendships, the right sense of sacrifice. Shaping you into someone who would walk willingly to death when the time came, Morticia concluded. For the greater good. Harry nodded miserably. 67 memory charms to ensure I stayed on the path he designed. To make sure I trusted him completely and never questioned why certain things kept happening to me year after year. Morticia studied him with unexpected gentleness. And now that you know his design, what will you do? It was the question that had been circling in Harry's mind since the revelation in Gringotts. What did one do after learning they had been groomed as a sacrificial lamb? My mother didn't accept it, Harry said finally. She was researching alternatives right up until the end. She believed there might be a way to destroy the Horcrux without destroying me. And the contingency measure she entrusted to Severus Snape? Some kind of experimental charm or potion. The notes she left weren't specific. Just that she'd created a separation protocol that might work to extract the soul fragment without killing the host. Morticia nodded thoughtfully. Which would explain both Dumbledore's desperation to recover these materials and Snape's independent actions. The former wishes to maintain control of the narrative, the latter may be attempting to fulfill his oath to your mother. Harry pushed himself away from the railing, sudden determination replacing his earlier despair. I need to find Snape before Dumbledore does. And I need to know exactly what my mother discovered. A dangerous undertaking, Morticia observed, though her tone suggested approval rather than caution. Severus Snape's loyalties have always been complex. According to my mother's research, he made an unbreakable vow to protect me. Not just a promise, a magical oath that would kill him if broken. Harry met Morticia's gaze directly. I think that's why he's always been so bitter. He hates me because I look like my father, but he's magically bound to keep me safe. A most exquisite torture, Morticia acknowledged with something like professional admiration. To be forever chained to the protection of the child of one's enemy. Before Harry could respond, Wednesday appeared in the doorway, her expression as deadpan as ever despite the urgency in her voice. Mother, Harry needs to come quickly. There's been a development. They followed her through the labyrinthine corridors of the mansion to the communications room, where the assembled Weasleys, Sirius, Remus, McGonagall, and various Addamses were gathered around a large enchanted mirror. What's happened? Harry asked as he entered. Sirius turned, his expression grim. Dumbledore's made his move. He's called a press conference at an undisclosed location. It's streaming now through the WWN. Harry focused on the mirror, which showed Dumbledore seated behind a simple desk, looking every inch the wise, concerned grandfather. His voice filled the room, deeply concerned for Harry's well-being. The events of the past days have been presented without crucial context, leading to misunderstandings of the gravest nature. He's spinning it, George muttered. Shoo. Ophelia hissed, eyes fixed on the broadcast. The memory modifications in question were undertaken with the utmost reluctance, and only when absolutely necessary to protect Harry from information that, due to his unique connection to Voldemort, represented genuine danger. Dumbledore's expression conveyed perfect sincerity. This connection, which I've monitored carefully since his parents' tragic deaths, allows Voldemort potential access to Harry's mind, particularly to knowledge that might be used against us all. Fred made a disgusted noise. So he's admitting he did it, but claiming it was necessary? It's a clever strategy, Morticia observed. By acknowledging the actions while reframing the motivation, he creates the appearance of transparency. Dumbledore continued, recent examinations conducted by independent mind healers confirm my gravest fears. Harry's connection to Voldemort has begun to affect his perceptions and judgment. The traumatic events of the Triwizard Tournament, culminating in witnessing Cedric Diggory's murder, have destabilized this connection, allowing darker influences to take hold. He's saying I'm possessed, Harry realized with growing outrage. That I can't be trusted because Voldemort's influencing me. Classic discrediting technique, Cardinal Addams noted. Undermine the accuser's reliability. I come forward now not to defend my actions, which were undertaken with the heaviest of hearts, but to plead for understanding of the greater context. Dumbledore's eyes seemed to twinkle even through the mirror's transmission. Harry is not merely a student I care for deeply, he is a child bound by prophecy to a terrible fate, one I have sought to postpone and ameliorate since he was placed in my care. The room fell silent as Dumbledore's strategy became clear. He's going to reveal the prophecy, Harry whispered. Or his version of it. The prophecy that linked Harry Potter to Voldemort speaks of neither being able to survive while the other lives, Dumbledore continued gravely. I have dedicated years to finding alternatives to this grim pronouncement, to creating a path where Harry might survive the confrontation that fate demands. McGonagall's hand flew to her mouth. Albus, you swore you would never reveal. The memory modifications now being portrayed as malicious control were, in fact, desperate attempts to shield Harry from knowledge that Voldemort could extract, knowledge that would accelerate the very confrontation I've worked to delay until Harry might be prepared to survive it. Dumbledore's expression grew somber. I ask the wizarding world to consider, who benefits from turning Harry against those who have protected him? Who benefits from isolating him from the very support systems established to ensure his survival? The answer, I fear, is Voldemort himself, who even now uses the connection between them to plant doubts, foster paranoia, and separate Harry from those who would give their lives for him. The broadcast continued, but Harry had heard enough. Rage and betrayal coursed through him, his magic responding by causing the lights in the room to flicker ominously. He's using the prophecy to justify everything, Harry said through clenched teeth. Making it sound like he's been protecting me from my inevitable death rather than preparing me for it. It's working, too, Remus noted grimly, pointing to a sidebar on the mirror showing public reactions. The narrative's already shifting. Tragic necessity rather than magical enslavement. What he fails to mention, Morticia observed coolly, is that a genuine desire to protect you would have involved honest communication, not memory manipulation. True guardianship empowers, it doesn't control. Harry paced the room, trying to channel his anger into coherent thought. We need to counter this. Now. Before his version becomes accepted truth. An interview? Sirius suggested. Get your side out there. No, Harry shook his head. He's too skilled at this game. Words against words, he'll always sound more reasonable, more experienced. Evidence, then, McGonagall suggested. The recovered memories speak for themselves. Memories can be questioned, interpreted, Harry countered, frustration mounting. He's already framing them as protective measures taken for my own good. Wednesday, who had been silently observing the exchange, suddenly spoke. You need to break the pattern. All eyes turned to her. Dumbledore expects you to defend yourself, to argue your perspective. Her dark eyes fixed on Harry with unnerving intensity. Don't. Instead, change the nature of the conflict entirely. How? Harry asked. By solving the problem he claims to have been protecting you from, Wednesday replied, as if the answer were obvious. Destroy Voldemort yourself. Now. Before either Dumbledore or the prophecy dictate your fate. The room fell silent as the audacity of this suggestion sank in. That's impossible, McGonagall finally managed. You know who is at the height of his power, with his Death Eaters reassembled, and Harry is surrounded by the most eccentrically powerful family in the wizarding world, Wednesday countered, plus a werewolf, a falsely accused murderer, 2 chaos engineers, she nodded at the twins, and a transfiguration mistress. Add mother's botanicals, father's dueling skills, and grandmama's potion work. It could work, Gomez exclaimed, mustache quivering with excitement. The ultimate preemptive strike. Bold. Unexpected. Insane, Sirius corrected, though he looked intrigued despite himself. Harry, however, was considering the idea with growing interest. His mother's research had identified all the likely Horcruxes and their possible locations. With the Addams family's resources and the combined knowledge of the Order members who'd sided with him. We'd need to deal with the Horcrux in me first, he said slowly. Find Snape, see if my mother's separation protocol actually works. And if it doesn't? Remus asked gently. Harry met his gaze steadily. Then at least I'd die on my own terms, not as Dumbledore's carefully cultivated sacrifice. The words hung heavy in the air, but there was something liberating about stating them aloud, about acknowledging the worst-case scenario and reclaiming agency even within its constraints. Morticia broke the somber silence. Before we plan assassination attempts, perhaps we should begin with finding Professor Snape. Dumbledore's broadcast changes the tactical landscape considerably. If Snape has my mother's contingency plan and is actually trying to help me, Harry reasoned, then he'll want to contact me without Dumbledore knowing. The question is how, Sirius mused. The mansion is under protective enchantments, and any owl addressed to you would be tracked given the current climate. Perhaps, McGonagall suggested carefully, we should consider that Severus may attempt to reach you through an intermediary, someone neither side would immediately suspect. All eyes turned to her. I wasn't thinking of myself, she clarified. Rather, someone with connections to both Hogwarts and alternative magical communities. Gomez's eyes lit up with sudden understanding. Of course. Cousin ITT. I was referring to Hagrid, actually, McGonagall corrected, looking somewhat baffled. Even better, Gomez declared, undeterred. 2 potential intermediaries. Double the chances of connection. Before the conversation could devolve further, an alarm sounded throughout the mansion, a low, thrumming tone that caused the Addamses to immediately snap to attention. Perimeter breach, Morticia announced, rising gracefully. Northwest quadrant. Death Eaters? Harry asked, drawing his wand. Unlikely, Wednesday replied, already moving toward the exit. The venomous tentacula would have triggered a different alarm for hostile intent. They made their way swiftly through the mansion and onto the grounds, following Morticia's sure steps toward the disturbance. As they approached the northwest corner of the property, Harry spotted a solitary figure standing just outside the protective barriers, tall, thin, draped in familiar black robes. Severus Snape. He stood perfectly still, making no attempt to breach the barriers further, his sallow face impassive as he watched their approach. In one hand, he held a small crystal phial containing a swirling silver-gold substance unlike any potion Harry had seen before. Potter, he acknowledged as they came within speaking distance, his voice carrying across the magical barrier. I believe I have something your mother intended you to have. Chapter 3, The Judgment of Shadows. Mother always said you'd come, Harry stated, staring at Snape through the shimmering magical barrier. The potion's master's face betrayed no emotion, but his eyes, usually cold and dismissive, held something unfamiliar. Uncertainty, perhaps. Or resignation. Your mother, Snape replied carefully, placed her faith in questionable vessels. Sirius growled low in his throat. If you've come to insult Lily's memory, I've come, Snape interrupted sharply, to fulfill a vow. He held up the crystal phial, its contents swirling with hypnotic patterns of silver and gold. This was her final work. Her contingency against Dumbledore's plans for her son. Harry studied the mysterious substance. The separation protocol. Something like surprise flickered across Snape's face. You know of it. My mother left me more information than Dumbledore realized, Harry answered. Though not the details of what you're holding. Morticia glided forward, her dark eyes evaluating the barrier between them. Professor Snape, while your arrival is fortuitous, your timing raises questions. Dumbledore has just publicly reframed his actions as protection rather than control. I am aware, Snape replied dryly. The headmaster's gift for manipulating perception remains undiminished. And yet here you stand, Sirius noted suspiciously, supposedly working against him. Forgive me if I find your loyalties difficult to track. Snape's lip curled in familiar disdain. My loyalties, Black, have never changed. They simply weren't what either Dumbledore or the Dark Lord believed them to be. Lily, Harry said softly. Snape's eyes snapped to him, and for a brief moment, his mask slipped, revealing raw emotion that disappeared so quickly Harry might have imagined it. Indeed. The single word carried volumes. Gomez, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, stepped forward with sudden decisiveness. Well. No sense conducting delicate negotiations through a barrier. The man's brought a potentially life-saving elixir, let's invite him in for tea. Morticia laid a restraining hand on her husband's arm. Prudence, darling. Professor Snape may have been followed. I was not, Snape stated flatly. I employed methods of concealment beyond even Dumbledore's considerable detection abilities. Wednesday, who had been studying Snape with clinical interest, suddenly spoke. He's telling the truth. His aura is intact, no tracking charms, no surveillance enchantments. Snape's gaze shifted to the young girl, a flash of grudging respect crossing his features. Unusual talents for a child your age. I'm not a child, Wednesday replied matter-of-factly. I'm an Addams. After a moment of silent deliberation, Morticia nodded to Lurch, who had materialized silently behind them. The butler groaned something unintelligible and waved a gnarled hand toward the barrier, which shimmered and parted just enough to allow Snape passage. As the potions master stepped onto Addams' territory, the air around him visibly rippled, as though the property's magic was testing his intentions. Snape endured this mystical examination without comment, though Harry noted the slight tightening of his grip on the crystal phial. Welcome to Blackwood Manor, Morticia greeted with formal precision. Though I suspect pleasantries are not your priority. They rarely are, Snape agreed coolly, his gaze fixing on Harry. We have limited time. Dumbledore's public relations offensive is merely prelude, he is gathering allies, preparing to reclaim his wayward charge through force if persuasion fails. Then let's not waste time, Harry replied, gesturing toward the mansion. Tell me what my mother created. The Addams family's dungeon, contrary to Harry's expectations, proved surprisingly well appointed as a potions laboratory. Ancient stone tables bore modern equipment alongside arcane instruments whose purpose he couldn't begin to guess. Cauldrons of various metals and compositions hung from ceiling hooks, while glass cabinets displayed ingredients Harry was certain were banned in most civilized countries. Grandmama's workroom, Wednesday explained as they entered. She'll be pleased someone's using it properly. Her last experiment turned Uncle Fester's skin purple for a month. He was so disappointed when it wore off, Pugsley added cheerfully. Snape surveyed the space with undisguised professional interest. Some of these ingredients haven't been commercially available for centuries. The Addams family never disposes of anything useful, Morticia replied, running one pale finger along a shelf of dusty vials. Especially substances with fatal applications. If this statement disturbed Snape, he showed no sign. Instead, he carefully placed the crystal phial on the central workstation and gestured for Harry to approach. What your mother created, he began without preamble, is neither potion nor spell in the conventional sense. It exists in the nebulous realm between disciplines, part ritual, part alchemical transformation, part charm work. Like the protection she left when she died, Harry observed. Snape inclined his head slightly. Lily Evans was unconventional in her approach to magical theory. She saw connections where others perceived only boundaries. Coming from Snape, this was extraordinary praise. The separation protocol, he continued, indicating the swirling substance, was designed specifically to address parasitic soul magic. Your mother theorized that the Dark Lord had created multiple anchors for his soul, Horcruxes, Harry interrupted. She identified them in her research. The diary was one. There are others, a locket, a cup, something of Ravenclaw's, his snake, and... He hesitated, me. Snape's face remained impassive, but Harry detected a flicker of surprise in his eyes. You've been thorough in your investigations. My mother was thorough, Harry corrected. I just inherited her work. McGonagall, who had joined them in the laboratory along with Sirius, Remus, and several Addamses, spoke up. Severus, are you saying Lily created a method to remove the fragment from Harry without harming him? That was her intention, Snape replied carefully. However, the protocol was never tested. It remained theoretical at the time of her death. Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dungeon's temperature. So we don't know if it works. We don't, Snape acknowledged. But your mother was rarely wrong in her magical innovations. What's the risk? Sirius demanded, moving protectively closer to Harry. Snape's expression hardened. The risk, Black, is that the protocol fails and the fragment remains. The alternative, his gaze shifted to Harry, is Dumbledore's plan. A plan in which you walk willingly to death when the time is deemed appropriate. The bluntness of this statement silenced even Sirius. Harry stared at the phial, its contents shifting between silver and gold as though alive. How does it work? It requires 3 components, Snape explained. The substance you see here, which must be consumed at the ritual's commencement. A runic circle to contain and direct the separation energy. And, he hesitated fractionally, a catalyst of shared blood. Shared blood? Remus questioned sharply. Someone related to Potter by blood must participate in the ritual, Snape clarified. Lily intended it to be herself, of course. Harry's heart sank. But she's gone. And the only blood relatives I have are the Dursleys, who would never, actually, Morticia interrupted smoothly, that may not be entirely accurate. She turned to Gomez. Darling, didn't Great-Aunt Calidora marry into the Potter line sometime in the 1800s? Gomez's eyes lit up. By Jove, you're right. Calidora Addams and Harfang Potter. Their granddaughter married your mother's cousin twice removed. He clapped his hands together enthusiastically. Making us, let me see, 7th cousins thrice displaced, or something equally meaningless to everyone except ritual blood magic. Harry stared at him. We're related? Everyone old enough is related in the wizarding world, Potter, Snape observed dryly. The question is whether the connection is magically significant enough for the ritual's purposes. Wednesday stepped forward. It is. When everyone turned to her, she shrugged slightly. I checked our family grimoire this morning after hearing about the Horcrux situation. The Addams bloodline intersects with the Potters through the Black family as well. Double connection, magically reinforced. Sirius nodded slowly. She's right. The Blacks intermarried with both families. It's distant, but magic often cares more about the existence of connections than their proximity. Then it's possible, Harry said, hope rising cautiously within him. We can actually try this. There remains the question of when, Snape pointed out. The ritual requires specific astronomical alignment to maximize its effectiveness. The next viable window is 3 nights hence, during the dark moon. That's cutting it close, Remus observed. Dumbledore's already mobilizing public opinion. We may not have 3 days before he makes his move. Then we strengthen the defenses, Gomez declared. No one breaches an Addams sanctuary uninvited. Why, during the Goblin Rebellion of 1612, my ancestor Desmodus Addams held off 300 attackers for 6 months using nothing but animated silverware and strategically placed quicksand. Morticia placed a calming hand on her husband's arm. An excellent suggestion, mon cher. Perhaps you could oversee the western perimeter enhancements while we prepare the ritual space. Properly channeled, Gomez's enthusiasm transformed into focused efficiency. Within hours, Blackwood Manor had become a fortress of layered magical protections, some conventional, others distinctly Addams in nature. The grounds themselves seemed to respond to the family's magic, trees bending to create natural barriers, fog gathering selectively to obscure sightlines, flowers transforming into carnivorous sentinels. Meanwhile, in the deepest chamber of the dungeon, Snape worked alongside Morticia and Wednesday to prepare the ritual space. Ancient runes were carved into the stone floor with painstaking precision, forming concentric circles of increasing complexity. At the center, a raised dais of black marble awaited its occupant. Harry observed these preparations with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The prospect of being free from the soul fragment, from the destiny Dumbledore had so carefully managed, was tantalizing. Yet the untested nature of his mother's protocol left room for doubt. "You're afraid," Wednesday noted, appearing silently beside him as he watched Snape inscribing the final runes. "Wouldn't you be?" Harry countered. "Fear is a logical response to uncertainty," she replied matter-of-factly. But Addamses face uncertainty differently than most. "I'm not an Addams." Wednesday studied him with her unsettling gaze. "You could be. In the ways that matter." Before Harry could ask what she meant, Morticia called him over to review the ritual's requirements. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation and planning, not just for the ritual itself, but for what might come after, regardless of the outcome. As the sun set on the second day of preparations, an unexpected visitor triggered the mansion's alarms. Unlike Snape's arrival, this breach emanated from multiple points simultaneously, suggesting a coordinated approach rather than a solitary intruder. "They found us," Sirius muttered as they gathered in the surveillance room, where enchanted mirrors displayed the property's perimeter. The mirrors showed robed figures advancing cautiously through the outer defenses, not attacking, but methodically testing for weaknesses. Their faces remained hidden, but their coordinated movements suggested professional training. "Aurors," McGonagall identified grimly. "Ministry sanctioned, by the look of their formation." "Fudge has switched sides again," Remus concluded. "Dumbledore must have convinced him. Or threatened him," Sirius added darkly. Harry studied the approaching force with growing concern. "They're not attacking outright." "Why?" "Public relations," Cardinal Addams supplied from where he monitored communication mirrors. "Dumbledore's narrative requires you to be portrayed as a victim, not an enemy. They'll attempt negotiation first, presenting themselves as a rescue party rather than an assault force." As if confirming this assessment, one of the mirrors activated to show a floating message outside the main gates, glowing letters spelling out, "Ministry officials request parley. Peaceful resolution sought." "How thoughtful," Morticia observed dryly. "They're invading with courtesy." "We should hear their terms," McGonagall suggested. "Delay tactics may work in our favor given the ritual timeline." Gomez adjusted his tie with an air of anticipation. "Nothing like a good parley. The tension, the veiled threats, the inevitable betrayal." "This isn't a game, Gomez," Sirius growled, though there was a hint of similar excitement in his own demeanor. Years in Azkaban had done nothing to diminish the Marauder's love for confrontation. "Of course not," Gomez agreed cheerfully. "It's diplomacy. Far more dangerous than any game." After brief consultation, they agreed to meet the ministry representatives at the property boundary, close enough for conversation, but with the protective barriers still intact between them. Morticia insisted that Harry remain inside the mansion despite his protests, a precaution that even he reluctantly acknowledged as prudent. From the surveillance room, Harry watched as Gomez, Morticia, Sirius, and McGonagall approached the main gates where three figures awaited. He recognized Kingsley Shacklebolt's tall form immediately, alongside the distinctive bowler hat of Minister Fudge. The third figure, to his surprise, was Percy Weasley, looking officious with a clipboard and quill. "Curious assembly," Mortimer Addams noted beside him. "A pragmatic Auror, a political weathervane, and an ambitious bureaucrat. Someone constructed this delegation carefully." "Dumbledore," Harry guessed. "He's covering all bases, ministry authority, law enforcement, and official record-keeping." The conversation at the gates was visible but not audible from their vantage point. Harry observed the formal greetings, Fudge's increasingly agitated gestures, Kingsley's measured responses, and Gomez's apparent delight in whatever verbal sparring was occurring. After several minutes, Wednesday entered the surveillance room carrying a peculiar device resembling an ear trumpet attached to a shrunken head. "Eavesdropping apparatus," she explained, positioning it toward the nearest mirror. Great-grandfather designed it for spying on family members' last will readings. As she activated the device, voices filled the room with surprising clarity. Absolutely insist that the boy be remanded to ministry custody for his own protection, Fudge was saying, his tone attempting authority but undermined by nervousness. Dumbledore has provided evidence that Potter's mental state is compromised by you-know-who's influence. Evidence? Sirius's voice dripped with skepticism. You mean the same evidence that last week had you calling my godson an attention-seeking liar? Your consistency is remarkable, Minister. Fudge purpled visibly. Circumstances have evolved. New information has come to light, indeed, Morticia interjected smoothly. Information such as Albus Dumbledore's systematic use of memory charms on a minor without consent or legal authority. Information such as his flight from justice when confronted with this evidence. Most illuminating. The circumstances of Dumbledore's departure have been greatly exaggerated, Percy stated primly, quill poised over his clipboard. The chief warlock removed himself from a potentially volatile situation to allow for calmer evaluation of complex factors. He ran because he was guilty, Sirius countered bluntly. And now he's manipulating the ministry into doing his dirty work while he orchestrates from the shadows. Kingsley, who had remained silent until now, spoke with measured care. Whatever the truth of past events, our current concern is Harry Potter's safety. Intelligence suggests Voldemort's forces may be targeting this location. How convenient, McGonagall observed tartly. And this intelligence comes from classified sources, Kingsley replied, though his expression suggested he shared her skepticism. Gomez stepped forward, twirling his mustache thoughtfully. Gentlemen, and lady, let me propose a compromise. Harry Potter remains under our protection for precisely 68 more hours, after which we will gladly receive a delegation from both the Ministry and the Wisengamot to re-evaluate the situation. 68 hours? Fudge spluttered. Absolutely not. The boy must be secured immediately. Secured? Sirius repeated dangerously. Interesting choice of words for a 15-year-old who's committed no crime. Minister, Morticia interjected, her voice somehow cutting through the tension despite its softness, consider the political implications carefully. Harry Potter has publicly accused Albus Dumbledore of magical enslavement, a serious charge with substantial evidence. Your personal intervention to forcibly remove him from his chosen sanctuary could be interpreted as partisan. Percy leaned forward to whisper urgently in Fudge's ear, his expression concerned. After a moment, Fudge's belligerence deflated visibly. 24 hours, he countered weakly. As a gesture of goodwill. 68, Gomez maintained cheerfully. Non-negotiable, I'm afraid. Family tradition. Something about the numerological significance of overcoming false imprisonment. My cousin Sirius would know the details. Sirius managed to keep a straight face at this obvious fabrication. Ancient black family custom. Very sacred. Fudge looked between them with growing frustration, clearly recognizing he was being manipulated but unable to identify exactly how. 48 hours, then, but with ministry observers stationed at the property boundary. 68 hours with no observers within 1 mile of the estate, Morticia countered smoothly. Our family's privacy is, after all, protected by treaty with 17 magical governments, including Britain's. The Addams Ministry Accord of 1749 is quite specific about sanctuary rights. Harry had to admire the seamless way the Addamses wove truth and fiction together, creating a tapestry of plausibility that left their opponents constantly off balance. Whether the treaty they referenced actually existed seemed almost irrelevant in the face of their absolute conviction. Percy was frantically flipping through pages on his clipboard, presumably searching for reference to this alleged accord. Kingsley's expression remained neutral, but a subtle shift in his posture suggested he was reassessing the situation. 60 hours, Fudge attempted one final negotiation, and I want personal assurance that Potter is here willingly and unharmed. "58 hours," Gomez countered unexpectedly, and Harry provides that assurance via secured magical communication rather than in person. Plus complimentary access to our West Dungeon for your next ministry fundraiser. The ambience is killer, literally, in 3 documented cases. The bizarre nature of this final offer seemed to short-circuit Fudge's negotiating faculties. After a moment of baffled silence, he nodded weakly. "Agreed. 58 hours, secured communication from Potter, and, rain check on the dungeon offer." "Excellent." Gomez clapped his hands together. "Shall we shake on it? I should warn you, I'm wearing my joy buzzer. Bit of a family tradition during diplomatic negotiations." In the surveillance room, Harry shook his head in disbelief. "They actually bought us the time we need." "Addams' negotiations always succeed," Wednesday stated matter-of-factly. "Usually because the other party becomes too confused to maintain coherent objections." As the ministry delegation retreated from the property boundaries, Harry felt a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. They had secured the time necessary for the ritual, but the confrontation had only been postponed, not avoided. "They'll be back," he said quietly. "And in greater numbers." "Of course," Wednesday agreed. "That's why we're preparing contingencies." Harry raised an eyebrow. "What kind of contingencies?" The ghost of a smile crossed her face. "The exploding kind." The night of the dark moon arrived with an unnatural stillness that seemed to permeate Blackwood Manor. Even the mansion's usual creaks and groans had fallen silent, as though the very structure held its breath in anticipation of the ritual to come. Harry stood before a full-length mirror in his temporary quarters, studying his reflection with strange detachment. For years, his identity had been defined by the lightning bolt scar, a visible symbol of survival, of chosen status, of prophesied destiny. Tonight, he hoped to redefine that identity on his own terms. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The door opened to reveal Sirius, his expression a careful mask of casual confidence that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's time," his godfather said simply. Harry nodded, turning away from the mirror. "Who's participating in the ritual besides me?" "Morticia will serve as the blood connection," Sirius explained as they walked through the shadowy corridors. "Snape will administer the protocol and manage the extraction process. McGonagall, Gomez, and I will anchor the outer circle to stabilize the magical energies." "And if something goes wrong?" Sirius's stride faltered almost imperceptibly. "Nothing will go wrong." "But if it does," Harry persisted. After a moment of silence, Sirius replied, "Then we improvise. It's what marauders do best." The ritual chamber deep beneath the mansion had been transformed. Hundreds of black candles cast flickering shadows across the stone walls. The runic circles carved into the floor now pulsed with subtle energy, the innermost inscriptions glowing with a silvery light reminiscent of Lily Potter's memory orb. Snape awaited at the center, his customary black robes exchanged for ritual attire of midnight blue embroidered with silver constellations. Beside him, Morticia stood equally resplendent in ceremonial garb that seemed to absorb rather than reflect the candlelight. "Mr. Potter," Snape acknowledged, his voice unnaturally formal. "Are you prepared?" Harry approached the innermost circle, feeling the ancient magic already beginning to stir around them. "As I'll ever be." "Before we begin," Snape continued, "there are aspects of this ritual your mother did not document publicly, aspects she shared only with me as the designated executor." Harry tensed. "What aspects?" "The separation protocol will not merely extract the foreign soul fragment," Snape explained carefully. "It will attempt to reveal and reverse any magical influences tied to that fragment, including, potentially, memory modifications linked to your connection with the Dark Lord." "You mean, any memory charm specifically designed to conceal information about your status as a Horcrux may break simultaneously with the extraction," Snape confirmed. "The psychological impact could be significant." "In other words," Harry translated grimly, I might suddenly remember a lot of unpleasant things all at once. Indeed. That explains why Dumbledore was so desperate to maintain control, Sirius observed from the outer circle. If the Horcrux was removed, Harry might naturally recover memories Dumbledore specifically suppressed about his condition. Harry took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. It doesn't change anything. I'm still doing this. Snape studied him for a moment, something unidentifiable flickering in his dark eyes. You have your mother's determination, he said finally, the closest thing to a compliment he had ever offered. And her intellect, Morticia added with unexpected warmth. The woman who designed this protocol was truly exceptional. Harry felt a surge of pride at these acknowledgments of Lily's brilliance. For so long, he had heard about his resemblance to James, his inheritance of his father's talents and tendencies. This recognition of his mother's legacy felt like reclaiming a part of himself that had been overshadowed. Let's begin, he said firmly. With ceremonial precision, Harry took his place at the center of the innermost circle. Snape handed him the crystal phial containing his mother's mysterious creation, its contents swirling with increasing agitation as if sensing the impending ritual. Consume it completely at the moment of culmination, Snape instructed. Not before. Around them, the others took their positions, Morticia directly opposite Harry in the middle circle, Sirius, McGonagall, and Gomez equidistant in the outermost ring. At some unseen signal, they began the ritual, their voices blending in an ancient incantation that seemed to resonate with the very stones beneath them. The runes brightened in response, pulsing in rhythm with the chant. Harry felt the magic building around him, pressing against his skin, seeking entry. Within his scar, something stirred uneasily, as if sensing the threat. Snape raised his wand, tracing complex patterns in the air that left lingering trails of silver light. By blood and sacrifice, by mother's will and son's consent, we call upon the ancient magics of separation and purification. Morticia extended her hand, a thin cut appearing across her palm without any visible cause. Blood of distant kin, freely given, to reclaim that which was stolen. A drop of her blood fell to the floor, striking the innermost runic circle. The symbols flared with sudden intensity, and Harry felt a sharp pain lance through his scar. The foreign presence within him, the fragment of Voldemort's soul that had been a silent passenger for 14 years, was reacting violently to the ritual's progress. Now, Potter, Snape commanded, his voice cutting through the haze of pain. The protocol. With shaking hands, Harry uncorked the phial and swallowed its contents in a single gulp. The liquid burned like ice and fire simultaneously, spreading through his body with alarming speed. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen, then the pain in his scar erupted with unprecedented force. Harry fell to his knees, clutching his forehead as the agony intensified beyond anything he had ever experienced. It felt as though something was being torn from his very being, ripped away cell by cell. Through the haze of torment, he was dimly aware of the ritual continuing around him, the chanting growing more urgent, the magical energies swirling with increasing violence. And then, abruptly, memories began to surface. Not gentle recollections, but jagged fragments of deliberately suppressed knowledge crashing through his consciousness. Dumbledore, leaning forward in his office, eyes grave, the connection you share with Voldemort, Harry, is more complex than I initially explained. When he failed to kill you, something unexpected occurred, a fragment of his soul attached to yours. A different conversation, third year, the Parseltongue ability is not inherited, Harry. You speak it because Voldemort speaks it. A piece of him lives within you. After the chamber, hushed voices he wasn't meant to overhear, the boy destroyed the diary with extraordinary instinct, Minerva. As though some part of him recognized what it truly was, perhaps because he himself contains a similar fragment. In the hospital wing after Quirrell, your mother's protection runs in your very blood, Harry. But so does something darker, something that must eventually be addressed if Voldemort is to be truly defeated. The memories continued to cascade, each one revealing another instance where Dumbledore had acknowledged Harry's status as a Horcrux to others while deliberately keeping Harry himself ignorant. Conversations with Snape, with McGonagall, with various Order members, all carefully removed from Harry's recollection, all pointing to the same terrible conclusion: Harry Potter had been raised as a sacrifice from the very beginning. Through the torrent of recovered memories and overwhelming pain, Harry became aware of a new sensation, a pulling, tearing feeling centered on his scar. The ritual was working. The Horcrux was being extracted. With the last of his strength, Harry focused on that sensation, mentally pushing the foreign presence away, rejecting its claim on his soul. His mother's voice seemed to whisper encouragement from the depths of memory: "Trust your instincts, Harry. You are more than a pawn in old men's games." The pain reached an unbearable crescendo, and then vanished so abruptly that Harry gasped at the sudden absence. Above him, suspended in the air where the ritual energies converged, a writhing mass of black smoke struggled against containment, its form vaguely reminiscent of a serpentine face contorted in fury. Snape moved with practiced efficiency, drawing a specialized container from within his robes, a crystal cube inscribed with containment runes. With precise wand movements, he directed the extracted Horcrux into the cube, which sealed with an audible snap upon capturing its prisoner. "It is done," he announced, though his voice betrayed uncharacteristic fatigue. "The fragment has been removed." Harry remained kneeling, his body trembling with exhaustion but his mind strangely, brilliantly clear for the first time in memory. The constant background noise that he'd never even recognized as foreign, the subtle influence that had colored his perceptions, his dreams, his very thoughts, was gone. "Harry?" Sirius approached cautiously, the ritual circles now dormant beneath his feet. "How do you feel?" Harry raised a hand to his scar, finding it cool to the touch. "Different," he managed. "Lighter. And..." He hesitated, struggling to articulate the flood of emotions accompanying his recovered memories. "Angry." "The memories have returned," Snape observed, not a question but a statement. "Yes." Harry's voice hardened. "All of them. Every conversation where Dumbledore acknowledged what I was. Every time he discussed my eventual sacrifice with the Order. Every moment he looked me in the eye and lied about why Voldemort was so fixated on me." McGonagall moved to help him to his feet, her expression haunted. "Harry, you must understand, many of us didn't know the full extent, but you knew something," Harry interrupted, no accusation in his tone, merely certainty. "You knew I carried a piece of him inside me. You knew Dumbledore was keeping secrets about my connection to Voldemort." She didn't deny it. Couldn't, with the recovered memories so fresh in Harry's mind. "What matters now," Morticia interjected smoothly, "is that you are free of the fragment. The prophecy's hold over your fate has fundamentally changed." Harry turned to Snape, who was securing the contained Horcrux in a warded box. "What happens to that?" "It will be destroyed," Snape replied simply. "Along with the others, once they are located." "My mother's research identified likely locations," Harry said. "With the Addams family resources and the skills assembled here, we could retrieve and destroy them all before Dumbledore or Voldemort realize what's happening." Gomez's eyes lit with enthusiasm. "A treasure hunt for soul fragments. Marvelous. We haven't had a proper family quest since Great-Uncle Vlad's search for the perfect immortality potion." "Did he find it?" Sirius asked, momentarily distracted. "Oh yes," Morticia replied serenely. "Though the side effects were rather troublesome. Sunlight allergy, garlic intolerance, chronic blood cravings. He's still working through the kinks in a cave somewhere in Transylvania." Before this tangent could develop further, a distant alarm sounded throughout the mansion, different from the previous perimeter breach notifications, higher-pitched and more urgent. The wards, McGonagall identified immediately. "Someone's dismantling them systematically." Dumbledore, Harry, and Snape said simultaneously, exchanging a brief look of shared certainty. 52 hours, Sirius growled. The Ministry agreed to 58. Fudge broke his word. Or Dumbledore circumvented official channels entirely, Snape countered, already moving toward the chamber exit. He would not risk Potter being freed from the Horcrux. It disrupts too many carefully laid plans. As they ascended from the ritual chamber, the mansion itself seemed to be responding to the threat, corridors rearranging themselves for more efficient movement, walls thickening where they faced outward, windows narrowing into defensive embrasures. Sentient architecture, McGonagall observed with professional appreciation. Highly sophisticated. The house has been in the family for generations, Morticia explained as they hurried toward the main hall. It's developed certain attachments. In the entrance hall, they found Wednesday, Pugsley, and the Weasley twins coordinating what appeared to be an elaborate defensive strategy involving animated suits of armor, carnivorous plants positioned at strategic intervals, and devices that Harry decided he'd rather not identify too closely. Eastern wards compromised, Wednesday reported without preamble. Magical signature matches descriptions of Dumbledore's casting style. Accompanied by approximately 12 others, mixed signatures suggesting both Order members and Ministry officials. A coalition, Morticia observed. Clever. Neither purely Ministry action nor purely Order initiative, making it difficult to challenge legally afterward. Harry turned to Snape. Will you fight against them? Some of them are your colleagues. Snape's expression remained unreadable. My vow to your mother supersedes all other allegiances. Until you are truly safe from both Dumbledore and the Dark Lord, my path is clear. Before Harry could respond, the mansion shuddered as something powerful struck the outer defenses. Outside, the night sky flashed with magical discharge as the Addams family's protective enchantments engaged with the intruders. Gomez appeared, straightening his tie with evident excitement. They've breached the outer perimeter. Marvelous spell work, very creative approach. The venomous tentacula barely slowed them down. This isn't a game, Gomez, McGonagall admonished, though without real heat. She had apparently grown accustomed to the Addams' perspective on potentially lethal situations. Of course not, he agreed cheerfully. It's a siege. Much more serious. Haven't had a proper one since the Goblin incident of 73. Fascinating tactics they employed, came right up through the wine cellar. Another impact shook the mansion, closer this time. Harry could now hear voices outside, familiar voices issuing commands, coordinating the assault on Blackwood Manor's defenses. We need to accelerate our plans, Morticia decided, her usual calm unshaken despite the literal attack on her temporary home. The Horcrux has been removed, that was our primary objective. Now we must ensure Harry's continued freedom while addressing the remaining fragments. Split up? Sirius suggested. Some of us deal with Dumbledore and his coalition, others begin the hunt for the remaining Horcruxes. Harry shook his head firmly. No. I'm not running while others fight my battles. I've spent too long being protected from truths I had every right to know. It's time I faced Dumbledore directly, not as his weapon or his sacrifice, but as myself. The conviction in his voice silenced even Sirius's protective objections. Besides, Harry continued, there's something none of you have considered. Now that the Horcrux is gone, I'm no longer constrained by the prophecy the way Dumbledore interpreted it. Neither can live while the other survives may have referred to the soul fragment within me, not my actual existence. This observation caused a moment of thoughtful silence, broken by another impact that rattled the windows. If Mr. Potter wishes to confront Dumbledore, Snape said finally, then our priority should be ensuring the confrontation occurs on terms favorable to our side. An audience, Morticia suggested suddenly, her red lips curving in a smile that would have chilled Harry before he'd come to know her. Not a battle, but a trial, with witnesses beyond Dumbledore's influence. The press, Sirius caught on immediately. International observers. Representatives from Gringotts, who have their own grievances regarding the Potter Vault breach. Precisely, Morticia confirmed. Dumbledore expects either capitulation or resistance, a scenario where he either reclaims Harry quietly or defeats obvious opposition, justifying his actions as protection. We offer a third option, public accountability. Harry felt a surge of appreciation for the Addams' approach to confrontation, not avoiding it, not rushing headlong into it, but reshaping it to their advantage through means the opponent would never anticipate. How do we get them all here in time? McGonagall asked practically. Dumbledore's forces are literally at the door. Wednesday held up what appeared to be a modified howler. Mass communication device. Based on howler principles but amplified through sympathetic magic to reach multiple recipients simultaneously. And we've already compiled the guest list, Fred Weasley added with a grin. Every reporter who's ever criticized Dumbledore, plus a few who worship him for balanced perspective. International Confederation representatives, Gringotts Security Director, 3 members of the Wisengamot who've always been skeptical of Dumbledore's power, and Rita Skeeter, George finished. Not our first choice, but she does have a talent for creating public spectacle. Another, stronger impact shook the mansion, and this time part of the eastern wall actually cracked, a spiderweb of fractures appearing in the ancient stone. There through the secondary wards, Gomez announced, consulting a peculiar device that resembled a barometer filled with what might have been blood. 2 more layers before they reached the house itself. Send the invitations, Harry decided. And then, let them in. Everyone stared at him. Potter, that is perhaps the most foolish, Snape began. It's perfect, Morticia interrupted, understanding dawning in her dark eyes. We don't resist. We welcome. We transform their raid into an unexpected social occasion they cannot control. Exactly, Harry confirmed. Dumbledore's prepared for a fight to rescue me. He's not prepared for a formal reception where he's asked to explain himself before international witnesses. After a moment of consideration, even Snape acknowledged the strategic merit with a reluctant nod. Unconventional, but potentially effective. The headmaster's greatest weapon has always been controlling the narrative. This disrupts his script. Then it's settled, Gomez declared, suddenly all business. Lurch, prepare the grand ballroom. Wednesday, send the mass communications. Pugsley, relocate the man-eating plants to the conservatory, we'll save those for the after-party. The mansion exploded into activity as the Addamses executed this bizarre battle plan with surprising efficiency. The grand ballroom, which Harry hadn't previously seen, was rapidly transformed from a dusty, cobweb-draped chamber into an eerily elegant reception space. Candelabras cast dramatic shadows across walls now adorned with the Addams family's most impressive, and unsettling, heirlooms and trophies. Intimidation through decoration, Morticia explained as she directed the placement of what appeared to be a stuffed chimera. A family tradition. While these preparations continued, the mass communication howlers were dispatched, dozens of crimson envelopes streaking into the night sky like reverse lightning, each carrying the same message: emergency conclave at Blackwood Manor. Albus Dumbledore confronts Harry Potter. International implications. Once-in-a-lifetime exclusive access. Arrive within the hour. In the wizarding world's media landscape, such an invitation was irresistible. Within minutes, the first responses began arriving, confirmation from the American Magical Observer, the French Divination, even the notoriously reclusive editor of the Quibbler. Outside, Dumbledore's coalition continued their methodical dismantling of the mansion's defenses, unaware that their forceful entry was being recontextualized even as they worked. Harry used these final moments of preparation to center himself. The removal of the Horcrux had left him feeling physically stronger but emotionally raw, the recovered memories still integrating with his conscious understanding, reshaping his perspective on virtually everyone he had ever trusted. "Are you certain about this approach?" Sirius asked quietly, finding Harry alone in a small antechamber adjacent to the ballroom. "We could still get you out through the emergency tunnels. Fight another day." Harry shook his head. "I'm done running. done being managed. Tonight ends with truth, whatever the consequences. Sirius studied him with a mixture of pride and concern. You've changed since coming here. The Addamses have that effect, Harry replied with a small smile. They see the world differently. To them, being unusual isn't something to hide or apologize for, it's something to celebrate. Even the darkest parts of themselves. A valuable perspective, Sirius acknowledged. Especially for someone who's spent a lifetime being simultaneously celebrated and controlled for their differences. A tremendous crash interrupted their conversation, the final barrier had fallen. Dumbledore and his coalition had breached the mansion itself. Showtime, Harry murmured, straightening his robes. Together, they walked into the grand ballroom, where the Addamses and their allies awaited the impending confrontation with varying degrees of tension and, in Gomez's case, barely contained glee. They didn't have to wait long. The massive double doors at the far end of the ballroom burst open in a display of magical force that would have been impressive had it not been so clearly theatrical. In the doorway stood Albus Dumbledore, power radiating from him in palpable waves, his wand raised and his expression set in lines of grave determination. Behind him clustered an assortment of Order members and Ministry officials, Molly and Arthur Weasley, looking uncomfortable, Kingsley Shacklebolt, his face carefully neutral, Alastor Moody, magical eye spinning suspiciously, and half a dozen Aurors in formal battle stance. For a moment, everyone froze in tableau, the invaders clearly unprepared for the formal reception area rather than defensive fortifications, the Addams contingent arrayed not in battle positions but in the manner of hosts awaiting guests. Albus. Gomez broke the silence, striding forward with hand extended as though greeting an expected dinner guest. Wonderful entrance. Very dramatic. The door blasting was a particularly nice touch, saves us the trouble of renovating. Dumbledore's prepared speech, whatever it had been, died on his lips. His gaze swept the ballroom, taking in the peculiar atmosphere, the conspicuous absence of defensive spellwork, and most significantly, Harry standing calmly at the center, utterly unrestrained. Harry, he recovered quickly, voice shifting to gentle concern. I'm relieved to find you safe. We've been deeply worried about your well-being under these unusual circumstances. Harry met the headmaster's eyes directly, feeling none of the reflexive trust that had once characterized their interactions. As you can see, Professor, I'm perfectly well. Better than I've been in years, actually. My boy, I understand you may feel that way, but the influence on your mind is gone, Harry interrupted firmly. Completely removed through a ritual designed by my mother. For the first time in Harry's memory, Dumbledore appeared genuinely shocked. His gaze sharpened, focusing on Harry's scar with sudden intensity. After a moment of silent assessment, his expression shifted subtly, the grandfatherly concern giving way to something cooler, more calculating. You've removed the connection, he stated rather than asked. Without consulting those who understand its full implications. You mean without consulting you, Harry corrected. The architect of the inevitable sacrifice narrative. Dumbledore's coalition shifted uncomfortably behind him, several members exchanging confused glances. Clearly, not all of them had been fully briefed on Harry's status as a Horcrux. Harry, Arthur Weasley spoke up hesitantly, what exactly is going on here? Dumbledore said you were being manipulated, that these people, he gestured vaguely at the Addamses, were exploiting your traumatic experiences to turn you against your friends. An interesting interpretation, Harry replied evenly, considering I came to the Addams family because they discovered 67 unauthorized memory charms on my mind, most placed by Headmaster Dumbledore. Molly gasped. But surely there must be some explanation. Oh, there is, Harry confirmed. I've recovered those memories now, and the explanation is quite simple. Dumbledore needed me to develop in a very specific way to fulfill his interpretation of the prophecy. Any deviation from his plan was immediately corrected through memory modification. Before Dumbledore could formulate a response to this direct accusation, a commotion at the ballroom side entrance drew everyone's attention. A stream of new arrivals began pouring in, reporters clutching quick quotes, quills and cameras, dignified representatives from international magical authorities, goblins in formal banking attire, and various members of Wizarding Britain's upper echelons who never missed a potential scandal. "What is the meaning of this?" Dumbledore demanded, his voice hardening as he realized the tactical situation had completely transformed. "Why, it's your hearing, Headmaster," Morticia explained with elegant simplicity. "You wished to address Harry directly regarding your concerns. These fine people wished to witness and document that conversation. In the interest of transparency." The brilliant simplicity of the trap was now fully apparent. Dumbledore had arrived prepared to rescue Harry through force if necessary, banking on either private capitulation or a controllable conflict narrative. Instead, he found himself center stage in an impromptu public hearing, surrounded by international witnesses beyond his direct influence. "This is irregular and inappropriate," Dumbledore attempted, though his usual authoritative tone fell flat in the face of dozens of witnesses now recording his every word and reaction. "Quite the contrary," McGonagall countered, stepping forward. "What could be more appropriate than addressing such serious accusations in the presence of neutral observers? Unless, of course, there are aspects of this situation you'd prefer remain private, Albus?" It was a masterful challenge, and Dumbledore recognized it immediately. Any attempt to shut down the proceedings or withdraw would now be interpreted as tacit admission of guilt. "Very well," he conceded with a grace that impressed Harry despite everything. "If Harry wishes to discuss these matters publicly rather than privately, I will of course respect his preference." With that simple pivot, Dumbledore attempted to reclaim some control of the narrative, casting himself as the reasonable authority figure respecting Harry's choices rather than someone cornered into public accountability. "Excellent," Gomez declared, gesturing expansively. "Let the proceedings begin. Cousin Ophelia, if you'd do the honors." The snake-haired lawyer stepped forward, conjuring a formal podium with a flick of her wand. "This extraordinary session addressing the allegations against Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore will now commence. The charges include 67 counts of unauthorized memory manipulation of a minor, magical guardianship violations, concealment of critical information regarding prophetic obligations, and premeditated construction of a sacrificial scenario without informed consent." The assembled press corps practically vibrated with excitement at these formal accusations. Quick quotes quills scratched frantically across parchment, while magical cameras flashed continuously. "Mr. Potter will present his testimony first," Ophelia continued, followed by supporting evidence including pensive memories, witness statements, and documentation retrieved from the Potter family vaults. Harry stepped forward, feeling strangely calm despite the momentous nature of the confrontation. The truth, so long denied him, was finally his to share. "For 4 years," he began, his voice steady, "Headmaster Dumbledore systematically removed or altered my memories whenever I discovered information he believed I shouldn't have, asked questions he wasn't ready to answer, or made choices that contradicted his plans for my development." He proceeded to detail the recovered memories chronologically, from his first-year discoveries about the prophecy, through his identification of the Horcrux phenomenon in second year, to his repeated requests to live with Sirius rather than the Dursleys. "But the most significant manipulations," Harry continued, "involved concealing the fact that I carried a Horcrux, a fragment of Voldemort's soul, within my scar. A fact Dumbledore confirmed to various Order members while deliberately keeping me ignorant." This revelation caused a sensation among the audience. Even several members of Dumbledore's coalition appeared shocked, Molly Weasley's hand flying to her mouth in horror. "The headmaster interpreted the prophecy to mean that I would need to die before Voldemort could be truly defeated," Harry explained, his tone matter-of-fact despite the gravity of his words. "And he shaped every aspect of my education, my relationships, and my self-perception to ensure that when the time came, I would walk willingly to that death." "Harry," Dumbledore interjected, his voice gentle but carrying clearly throughout the ballroom, "you misunderstand. Everything I did was to explore alternatives, to find a path where your survival might be possible. Then why hide it from me? Harry challenged. Why not tell me the truth from the beginning? Why remove my memories every time I got close to understanding my own situation? You were a child, Dumbledore replied, appealing now to the audience as much as to Harry. No child should bear the weight of such knowledge. Yet you allowed me to face Voldemort repeatedly, Harry countered. To risk death year after year without understanding why he was so fixated on me. You permitted danger while withholding context. I sought to preserve your childhood, by sending me back to abusive relatives every summer. By making me forget when I begged to live elsewhere. Harry's composure cracked slightly. That's not protection, Professor. That's control. The back and forth continued, Dumbledore defending his actions as reluctant necessities driven by prophecy and greater good, Harry dismantling each justification with the simple power of recovered truth. Throughout, the audience remained spellbound, witnessing a confrontation unprecedented in modern wizarding history, the boy who lived directly challenging the greatest wizard of the age on grounds of fundamental betrayal. As Harry's testimony concluded, Ophelia called upon supporting witnesses, McGonagall reluctantly confirming instances where Dumbledore had discussed Harry's eventual sacrifice with the Order, Snape verifying Lily Potter's independent research and preparations to protect her son from both Voldemort and Dumbledore's machinations, even Kingsley Shacklebolt, breaking ranks with visible discomfort to acknowledge the irregularities in how Harry's guardianship had been handled following his parents' deaths. Throughout it all, Dumbledore maintained his composure, occasionally offering explanations or contextualizing specific incidents, but the cumulative weight of evidence transformed the proceedings from ambiguous accusations to damning indictment. The turning point came when Snape produced the secured box containing the extracted Horcrux, its malevolent presence palpable even through the containment measures. This fragment, he explained clinically, was removed from Mr. Potter through a ritual developed by Lily Potter specifically to counter the headmaster's interpretation of the prophecy. Its successful extraction demonstrates that the boy's death was never a requirement for Voldemort's defeat, merely a convenient interpretation that simplified Dumbledore's strategic calculations. The implication was devastating, that Dumbledore had accepted Harry's necessary sacrifice not because it was inevitable, but because it was expedient. As the evidence presentation concluded, the ballroom fell into a hushed silence broken only by the scratching of reporters' quills. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict before any formal judicial process could begin. Dumbledore stood exposed not as the wise, benevolent guardian of the wizarding world, but as a manipulator whose ends justify means philosophy had led him to treat a child as a disposable weapon. Albus Dumbledore, Ophelia announced formally, in light of the evidence presented, do you wish to enter a plea regarding these accusations? It was a theatrical flourish. This was not an actual court, despite the trappings of judicial procedure, but it created a moment of undeniable dramatic tension. Dumbledore surveyed the room, his gaze finally settling on Harry. For the first time, the twinkling was entirely absent from those blue eyes, replaced by something that might have been regret. I acted as I believed necessary, he said finally, addressing Harry directly rather than the assembled witnesses. The prophecy presented impossible choices, and I made mine. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps my fear of Voldemort's return led me to justify actions I would once have condemned. He paused. I am sorry, Harry. Not for trying to protect you, but for failing to trust you. The apology, unexpected and seemingly genuine, created a complicated ripple of reaction through the audience. It was neither a full admission of wrongdoing nor a denial, rather, a nuanced acknowledgement that good intentions had led to questionable methods. Harry studied the man who had shaped his life so profoundly, feeling neither the blind trust of his earlier years nor the raw fury of his initial discoveries. What remained was something more complex, understanding without absolution. I believe you thought you were doing what was necessary, Harry responded carefully. But good intentions don't justify what was done to me. 67 times, you decided I couldn't be trusted with my own memories, my own choices. That isn't protection. It's ownership. Before Dumbledore could respond, the ballroom doors burst open once more, this time admitting a contingent of official-looking wizards in formal judicial robes. Albus Dumbledore, announced their leader, a stern-faced witch with an unmistakable air of authority, by order of the International Confederation of Wizards Special Judicial Council, you are hereby detained pending formal investigation into charges of magical rights violations, unauthorized memory manipulation, and conspiracy to circumvent prophecy protocols. Dumbledore's coalition shifted nervously, several members moving as if to intervene, but the headmaster himself raised a hand to still them. There is no need for conflict, he said calmly. I will cooperate fully with the investigation. It was, Harry realized, Dumbledore's final strategic calculation, recognizing that resistance would only confirm guilt in the public eye, while dignified cooperation preserved at least the possibility of eventual redemption. As the ICW representatives approached to formally take Dumbledore into custody, he turned once more to Harry. I hope, in time, you will understand that everything I did, however misguided, was motivated by care for you and for our world. I understand your motivations, Harry replied evenly. But understanding isn't the same as forgiveness. Something like genuine sadness crossed Dumbledore's features before he turned away, surrendering his wand with ceremonial dignity to the ICW representatives. The assembled audience watched in stunned silence as the greatest wizard of the age was escorted from the ballroom, his era of unquestioned authority conclusively ended. In the aftermath of Dumbledore's departure, the ballroom erupted into chaotic activity, reporters clamoring for additional statements, international representatives conferring urgently, the remaining members of Dumbledore's coalition looking lost and directionless without their leader. Harry felt a strange emptiness as he watched it unfold. The confrontation he had both dreaded and needed had concluded not with magical battle but with quiet accountability, powerful in its way, but lacking the cathartic release he had half expected. Morticia appeared beside him, her presence somehow calming amid the swirling chaos. Justice rarely feels as satisfying as we imagine it will, she observed, seeming to read his thoughts. Especially when the wrongdoer acknowledges their actions without truly understanding their harm. Harry nodded slowly. It doesn't feel like victory. Because it isn't victory, she replied simply. It's merely the beginning of something new. The removal of one obstacle among many. Her words reminded Harry that while Dumbledore's manipulation had been exposed and halted, Voldemort remained a threat, perhaps even more dangerous now that the wizarding world's leadership had been thrown into disarray. The Horcruxes, he said, refocusing on the larger mission. We need to find and destroy the others before Voldemort realizes what we're doing. Already in progress, Morticia assured him. While these proceedings unfolded, certain members of our family began the necessary preparations. Cousin What is particularly adept at obtaining objects others consider irretrievable. Harry blinked. You're already hunting the Horcruxes? Addamses never waste a good distraction, she explained with the ghost of a smile. While all eyes were on your confrontation with Dumbledore, the real work continued elsewhere. This pragmatic approach to world-saving was so refreshingly different from the high drama and personal sacrifice that had characterized Harry's previous encounters with evil that he couldn't help but laugh, a genuine sound of surprise and appreciation that drew curious glances from nearby reporters. You know, he said when he'd recovered, I think I might have been sorted into the wrong house at Hogwarts. There's something very Slytherin about the Addams approach to problem-solving. Houses, labels, divisions, Morticia waved a dismissive hand. The Addams family recognizes only one meaningful categorization, those who embrace their true nature, however unconventional, and those who don't. As the initial frenzy began to subside, Sirius made his way to Harry's side, trailed by Remus, McGonagall, and the Weasley twins. Well, that was certainly more effective than blasting him through a wall, Sirius observed wryly. Though I admit I was looking forward to the blasting option. There's still Voldemort for blasting purposes, Harry reminded him. Indeed, McGonagall agreed, her expression uncharacteristically fierce. And without Dumbledore's restraining influence, we can perhaps adopt more direct approaches. The twins exchanged gleeful looks that suggested they had already begun formulating said approaches. "What happens now?" Harry asked, the enormity of recent events finally beginning to sink in. With Dumbledore detained, the Order fractured, and the Ministry in confusion. "Now," came Wednesday's voice as she materialized beside them, "we change the rules of engagement entirely." All eyes turned to the solemn girl, who continued with her usual deadpan delivery. "Voldemort expects you to face him as Dumbledore's protégé, alone, noble, self-sacrificing. Instead, you'll confront him as an Addams ally, supported, strategic, and decidedly unsportsmanlike." "Unsportsmanlike?" Remus repeated, bemused. "Fair fights are for people with limited imagination," Pugsley explained, joining his sister. "We prefer overwhelming advantages." "The boy makes an excellent point," Moody growled, surprising everyone by limping forward from where he'd been observing the proceedings. "Been saying it for years. Dark wizards don't fight fair, why should we?" "Alastair," McGonagall began disapprovingly, "surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm suggesting we stop treating this like a proper wizarding duel with rules and honor," Moody interrupted bluntly. "The Dark Lord's made himself unkillable through the foulest magic imaginable. Time we responded with equal creativity." A slow smile spread across Gomez's face. "I like your thinking. Very Addams. In fact, I believe Great Aunt Desdemona once developed a rather unique approach to dealing with self-proclaimed immortals. Involved a combination of quicklime, temporal displacement, and creative taxidermy." "That won't be necessary," Harry interjected hastily, trying not to imagine the details of Desdemona's methods. "But the general principle is sound. Voldemort expects me to face him as Dumbledore trained me, directly, openly, relying primarily on love and sacrifice as my weapons." "And instead?" Sirius prompted. Harry looked around at the strange coalition that had formed around him, the macabre but fiercely loyal Addams family, Sirius and Remus, free of Dumbledore's restraining influence, McGonagall, her traditional sensibilities balanced by pragmatic determination, the twins, whose creative chaos had always been limited by institutional boundaries, even Snape, whose complex loyalties had finally crystallized around his vow to Lily. Instead, Harry answered, a new confidence in his voice, "We bring every resource, every unexpected tactic, every unsportsmanlike advantage to bear, not because it's noble, but because it's effective." The discussion that followed transformed rapidly into a war council unlike any the wizarding world had seen, conventional magical approaches melding with Addams family traditions so ancient and obscure they predated modern magical classification. International contacts were leveraged, goblin alliances negotiated, magical creatures consulted for their unique perspectives on soul magic. Throughout it all, Harry found himself not at the center as the chosen one bearing sole responsibility, but as one voice among many, respected for his insights but not burdened with messianic expectations. It was, perhaps, the first time in his wizarding life that his contributions were valued for their merit rather than his prophesied status. As dawn approached, casting long shadows through the ballroom's high windows, the initial framework of a plan had taken shape, a multi-pronged approach to locating and destroying the remaining Horcruxes while simultaneously preparing for direct confrontation with Voldemort himself. "It's a good plan," Morticia observed as the gathering finally began to disperse, various individuals departing to execute their assigned responsibilities. "Unconventional, adaptable, and suitably ruthless. Not how Dumbledore would have approached it," Harry noted. "Which is precisely why it may succeed," she replied. "The most dangerous opponent is the one who refuses to behave as expected." As Harry watched the sunrise from the balcony where his strange journey with the Addams family had effectively begun, he reflected on how profoundly his perception had shifted in mere days. The weight of prophesied destiny, of carefully cultivated martyrdom, had been replaced by something both more complex and more liberating, the responsibility of genuine choice. "Penny for your thoughts?" Sirius asked, joining him at the railing. "I was just thinking about what happens after," Harry replied. "Assuming we succeed. Assuming I survive." what then? Sirius studied him thoughtfully. That's the question, isn't it? Without Dumbledore's path laid out for you, without the Horcrux influencing you, without the Dursleys to return to, who is Harry Potter when he's truly free to decide? I don't know, Harry admitted. I've spent so long being what others needed or expected me to be. Well, Sirius grinned, you could always become an honorary Addams. Wednesday seems quite taken with you, in her uniquely terrifying way. Harry laughed despite himself. I think taken with might be an exaggeration. She told me yesterday that my survival instincts were adequately developed for a non-Addams. High praise, coming from her, Sirius observed. But seriously, Harry, whatever you choose, whoever you become, I'll be there. Not to direct or control, but to support. As your parents would have wanted. As you deserve. The simple promise, delivered without grandiosity or manipulation, meant more to Harry than any of Dumbledore's elaborate protective schemes ever had. Thanks, Sirius, he said quietly. Then, with a decisive nod toward the rising sun, let's go hunt some Horcruxes. Epilogue. 3 months later the Great Hall of Hogwarts had been transformed for the victory celebration, its enchanted ceiling reflecting not the actual weather outside but a spectacular display of magical fireworks designed by the Weasley twins specifically for the occasion. House banners had been replaced with unified displays showing all 4 mascots intertwined, a symbolic representation of the school's newfound unity in the aftermath of recent events. Harry observed the festivities from a quiet corner, still adjusting to the strange sensation of being celebrated for an accomplishment rather than a survival he couldn't remember. The defeat of Voldemort, permanently this time, with all Horcruxes destroyed and his reconstituted form vanquished through a combination of ancient magic, modern innovation, and what Gomez had enthusiastically termed creative overkill, had occurred just 3 weeks earlier. The wizarding world was still processing the rapid series of changes that had followed Dumbledore's detention and Voldemort's defeat, reforms at the Ministry, overhauls of magical education policy, international treaties strengthening protections against mental manipulation and prophetic exploitation. Not enjoying being the center of attention? Wednesday appeared beside him, her black dress standing out starkly against the colorful celebration. Just taking a moment, Harry replied. Still feels surreal. Defeating Dark Lords often does, she observed with her usual deadpan delivery. The first few times, at least. Harry smiled, having grown accustomed to the Addams' perspective on what constituted normal experience. Will your family be returning to America soon? Next week, she confirmed. Though Mother has arranged for regular portkey access. She says your family now, regardless of technical residence. The matter-of-fact statement warmed Harry in ways he couldn't fully articulate. The Addamses' casual inclusion of him in their family circle, no grand declarations, just simple assumption of belonging, had been one of the most healing experiences of his life. I'll miss you, he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. All of you. Wednesday regarded him with her unervingly direct gaze. Absence isn't separation for those who share appreciation for the macabre, she stated, as close to sentimentality as she ever ventured. Besides, Pugsley would never forgive me if I didn't bring you for the annual family hunting expedition. Should I be concerned about what exactly you hunt? Only if you're unwilling to run. The ghost of a smile touched her lips. But you've proven surprisingly adept at survival for someone with such a conventional upbringing. From Wednesday, this constituted high praise indeed. Across the hall, Harry spotted Sirius and Remus in animated conversation with McGonagall, now officially installed as Hogwarts Headmistress. The school itself had undergone significant changes, curriculum reforms, enhanced protections against memory manipulation, and perhaps most significantly, a newly transparent approach to addressing prophecies that involved students. The fate of Dumbledore remained a complex topic in wizarding society. Following his detention and formal trial, he had been sentenced not to Azkaban but to a form of magical probation that limited his ability to influence others while requiring community service focused on research into ethical applications of mind healing. It was, in many ways, a more fitting consequence than imprisonment, acknowledging both the genuine good he had accomplished and the serious ethical boundaries he had crossed. Potter. Snape's distinctive voice interrupted Harry's reflections. The potions master approached with his usual measured stride, though his traditional black robes now bore subtle silver accents reflecting his recent appointment as deputy headmaster. Professor, Harry acknowledged, their relationship having evolved into something resembling mutual respect following the shared mission of Horcrux destruction. The restoration of your parents' cottage in Godric's Hollow is complete, Snape informed him without preamble. The warding specialists report that all original protective enchantments have been successfully reconstructed, with additional measures as specified. Thank you, Harry replied, genuinely grateful for Snape's oversight of the project. The decision to restore and inhabit his parents' original home rather than establishing residence elsewhere had been deeply personal, not an attempt to recapture what was lost, but to honor it while creating something new. Snape inclined his head slightly, then added with uncharacteristic hesitation, "Your mother would be satisfied with recent developments." Coming from Snape, this constituted extraordinary praise. "I think so too," Harry agreed, though probably surprised by some of the alliances formed along the way. Snape's gaze flickered briefly toward Wednesday, who had drifted away to examine a particularly gruesome gargoyle decoration with professional interest. Indeed. The Addams family's involvement was unexpected. But effective, Harry pointed out. Undeniably. After a moment's pause, Snape added, "The headmistress asked me to inform you that the Board of Governors has unanimously approved your proposal regarding the defense against the dark arts curriculum reforms." This news brought a genuine smile to Harry's face. The proposal, combining practical defensive training with ethical discussions about magical power and responsibility, represented his first concrete contribution to reshaping magical education following Dumbledore's removal. "That's excellent news," he said. "Will you be involved in the implementation?" "In an advisory capacity," Snape confirmed. "Though the primary instruction will be shared between Lupin and a rotating series of specialists." The rehabilitation of Remus's teaching career had been among the first reforms pushed through following the ministry's reorganization, the anti-werewolf legislation dismantled in favor of more nuanced regulations that address genuine safety concerns without blanket discrimination. As Snape departed with his customary abruptness, Morticia and Gomez approached, their distinctive presence drawing curious stares from celebrating students despite the weeks they had spent at Hogwarts assisting with post-Voldemort security measures. "Harry, darling," Morticia greeted him, "we've just been discussing the most fascinating development with the goblins. Apparently, your defeat of Voldemort has elevated your status in their warrior hierarchy to something called Bane of Soul Splitters. Comes with quite impressive vault access privileges. And a ceremonial battle axe." Gomez added enthusiastically. "Magnificent craftsmanship. They're delivering it next Tuesday. Suggested you clear your schedule for the Blood Oath ceremony." Harry had long since learned to take such announcements in stride. "I'll make sure I'm available. Though I should probably check exactly what a Blood Oath ceremony entails." "Nothing too elaborate," Gomez assured him. "Just the standard pledge to honor ancestral enemies, avenge ritual slights, and maintain proper decapitation technique. Basic goblin diplomacy. The important aspect," Morticia continued smoothly, "is that it formalizes your status as a friend of the Goblin Nation, quite useful for our ongoing projects." The projects to which she referred involved the complex process of reforming Wizarding Britain's approach to non-human magical beings, a priority Harry had established following Voldemort's defeat, recognizing that lasting peace required addressing centuries of systemic inequality. "Speaking of projects," Harry said, "has there been any update on Dumbledore's research?" Morticia's expression grew thoughtful. "His work on memory restoration continues to show promise. The St. Mungo's team reports significant progress with several long-term obliviation victims. It seems his expertise is finally being directed toward healing rather than control. There was a certain poetic justice in Dumbledore's sentence requiring him to develop methods to undo the very type of harm he had inflicted on Harry, not erasing his past actions, but creating a form of restitution through genuine contribution. "Good," Harry said simply. "That's good." As the evening progressed, Harry found himself drawn back into the celebration, accepting congratulations and well wishes with growing comfort. The weight of being the boy who lived had transformed into something more manageable, respect earned through actions rather than worship based on an accident of survival. Later, as the festivities began to wind down, Harry found himself on the astronomy tower with Sirius, gazing out over the Hogwarts grounds bathed in moonlight. "Your parents would be proud," Sirius said quietly. "Not just of defeating Voldemort, but of how you've handled everything since, the reforms, the coalition building, the focus on preventing future Dark Lords rather than just celebrating this victory." "I hope so," Harry replied. "Sometimes I wonder what they'd think of some of our methods. The Addams approach isn't exactly what most would consider traditionally light-sided magic." Sirius laughed. James would have been terrified of Wednesday for about 5 minutes, then completely fascinated. And Lily, he paused, smiling at some private memory, Lily would have appreciated anyone who challenged magical conventions and got results. She was never as rule-bound as people assumed. "So I've gathered from her research," Harry agreed, thinking of the innovative magical approaches his mother had developed, work now being studied and expanded upon by a new generation of magical theorists. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched a shooting star trace its path across the night sky. "Have you decided about next year?" Sirius asked eventually. "McGonagall's offer to complete your education here, Bosbaden's exchange program invitation, or the Addamses' suggestion of alternative magical immersion at their estate?" It was a question that would have induced anxiety months ago, the weight of choosing his own path still unfamiliar after years of having his course predetermined. Now, however, Harry found himself approaching the decision with thoughtful consideration rather than pressure. "I'm thinking a combination," he replied. "Base my studies here at Hogwarts, but with regular visits to both Bosbatons and the Addams estate. Learn from multiple traditions instead of limiting myself to one perspective." Sirius nodded approvingly. "Creating your own path. Exactly as you should." As they turned to head back inside, Harry paused for one last look at the peaceful grounds. The wizarding world was far from perfect, centuries of prejudice and magical tradition couldn't be dismantled overnight, but for perhaps the first time in his life, he faced the future with neither prophetic burden nor manipulated destiny shaping his choices. Whatever came next would be determined not by Dumbledore's greater good or Voldemort's opposing darkness, but by Harry's own decisions, supported by the strange, wonderful coalition of friends and allies he had gathered along the way. Among them, perhaps most unexpectedly but most valuably, a family that embraced darkness not as evil but as a natural part of a balanced world, who had taught him that being unusual wasn't a burden to bear but a strength to wield, and that the most powerful magic often came from embracing rather than denying the shadows within. As if summoned by this thought, Wednesday appeared at the tower entrance, her expression as solemn as ever. "The carriages are preparing to depart," she informed them. "Mother sent me to remind you that our invitation to visit at Samhain remains open. Grandmother is planning a special ceremony to commune with your parents' spirits. Tell your mother I'll be there," Harry promised. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." As they descended the tower stairs together, Harry reflected that perhaps the most valuable lesson the Addams family had taught him wasn't about magic or power or even family, but about the freedom that came from accepting all parts of oneself, even those that others found strange or frightening. In the end, that acceptance had proven more powerful than any prophecy. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.